Chapter 523. Su-chan looked at Ao Wushuang eagerly and said in a low voice, "Master, if I don't go, you have to go, right? That's Yundong's kind intention. Go to the net." 7K. Oath M. Ao Wushuang said angrily, "No, I won't go, and you can't go either. Do you think I don't know what you're up to? You're just..." But before she could finish her words, she heard Li Yundong shouting at her from outside the door. "Chenbei Ao Wushuang, Ziyuan has picked out a dress for you. Do you think it fits?" After hearing this, Su-chan rolled her eyes and said tentatively, "Master, you don't want Yundong's, but you can't refuse Sister Ziyuan's, can you? You have to give her face, don't you?" Ao Wushuang was exasperated. "No, I don't want any of them. I don't want any of them." As soon as she finished speaking, she heard Lu Yuehong knocking on the door and complaining, "Shimmy, what are you doing? What's so important? Didn't I hear that you were going to leave a few minutes ago? You don't even want to accept the kindness of the leader and Zhenren Ziyuan. It's not right, is it?" Ao Wushuang was helpless. She glared at Su-chan fiercely, rushed to the door, opened it, and rushed to Li Yundong like a gust of wind. She snatched the bag from his hand and said through gritted teeth, "Thank you." Then she rushed back like a gust of wind. Li Yundong and Ziyuan were stunned and looked at each other. Li Yundong stared blankly and said, "What's wrong with her? Who offended her?" Ziyuan also stuttered and said, "That's my thing. Your thing is in my hands." Ao Wushuang returned to the room with a cold face, only to see the little girl sitting on the bed and meditating, as if she had already entered a trance. Ao Wushuang was stunned and couldn't help nodding. She thought to herself, she's worth teaching. She wanted to test Su-chan, so she shook the bag in her hand and said, "Channer, do you want to know what's inside?" But Su-chan was still motionless like a stone. Ao Wushuang was stunned. She knew her disciple's character very well, and she knew that Su-chan would never be unresponsive. Her heart couldn't help but move, and then she became furious. She pointed at Su-chan on the bed. Sure enough, Su-chan's body suddenly disappeared with a whoosh, leaving only a Liu Jiayin spirit talisman floating slowly in the air. Ao Wushuang was furious. "Evil disciple, how dare you fight with me?" She suddenly turned around and wanted to rush out and pull Su-chan back, but then she thought, you can't force a melon to be sweet. Su-chan is so playful and lively. Cultivation is really a headache. What would happen if this went on? Thinking of this, Ao Wushuang couldn't help but feel a headache. An idea suddenly flashed through her mind, and she thought to herself, do I have to use this method? Su-chan used the trick of a cicada escaping from its shell and slipped outside. But not long after she slipped out, she regretted it. When she saw clearly what Li Yundong had bought for her, she sneaked back. As soon as she entered the door, she saw Ao Wushuang sitting cross-legged on the spot, motionless, like a clay bodhisattva. When Su-chan saw her Liu Jiayin spirit talisman lying quietly in the same place, she knew that her trick had been seen through. Her heart skipped a beat. Just as she was about to rush over and use her method of acting coquettishly to get away with it, she heard Ao Wushuang sigh. Ao Wushuang opened her eyes, which were full of disappointment. She said to Su-chan with a look of exasperation, "Channer, do you still want to continue on the path of cultivation? Do you really want to see yourself become a burden to Li Yundong?" Su-chan knew that she was in the wrong. She lowered her head, rubbed the corner of her clothes, and whispered, "No, I don't want to." Ao Wushuang sighed and said, "As Li Yundong's partner, you don't want to make progress in cultivation. Have you ever thought that if you meet an enemy in the future and they attack you? If you are caught, even if Li Yundong has great ability, he can only be captured and killed." Speaking of this, Ao Wushuang's eyes suddenly turned red. She choked and said, "Do you know how Wang Yuanshan was caught in the end? At that time, he was the youngest Jinshin master in the world, and everyone said that he would be the best in the world in the future. But it was because of me, because my cultivation was too low, that I was finally caught by the people of Xueqi school, and then Xueqi school used me to lead Wang Yuanshan into a trap. In the end, I had to live alone for the rest of my life, and heal." Speaking of this, Ao Wushuang couldn't help but burst into tears. Only then did Su-chan know why her master had been forcing her to cultivate. She also seemed to feel the same way and felt sad in her heart. She couldn't help but reach out to hold Ao Wushuang's hand, tears streaming down her face. Ao Wushuang sighed and said, "Channer, do you know why I only favored you in the Fox Zen school? It's because you are the most similar to me at that time. We are both playful and naive. I just don't want you to follow my old path and follow in the footsteps of Wang Yuanshan and me. Su-chan couldn't help crying. She threw herself into Ao Wushuang's arms and cried, I'm sorry, master. It's my fault. I will cultivate hard in the future. Ao Wushuang grabbed Su-chan's hand and said, if you want to cultivate, you have to go back to the mountain with me and stay away from the secular world. Only in this way can you calm down and cultivate in peace. Can you do that? When Su-chan heard this, she immediately stopped crying. Her eyes widened and she thought to herself, am I going to be separated from Yundong? How can I do this? How can I live without Yundong? Su-chan widened her eyes and looked at Ao Wushuang with tears in her eyes. She cried, Master, I can't do without Yundong. Without him, I feel empty in my heart, as if I have lost my soul. If that happens, I will definitely not be able to cultivate well. Ao Wushuang looked at Su-chan fixedly. After a long time, she sighed and shook her head, saying, it's a sin, it's really a sin. I knew it would be like this. But you can't go on like this. When you are by his side, you are playful and have no mood to cultivate. When you leave him, you are worried and can't cultivate either. What should we do? Su-chan was stunned and lowered her head. She hesitated for a long time before slowly raising her head and saying with a red face, as long as Yundong cultivates to the Jinshin phase, we can't. Su-chan stammered and stammered. Ao Wushuang couldn't help but snort and said, then we can have dual cultivation, right? Su-chan's cheek suddenly turned red. She snorted softly like a mosquito and nodded slightly. Yes. Ao Wushuang couldn't help sighing and said, Jinshin. Hey, Jinshin. There are hundreds of thousands of cultivators in the world, but how many of them are in the Jinshin phase? I can count them with both hands. He has only cultivated for more than half a year. When do you expect him to cultivate to the Jinshin phase? Su-chan couldn't help but raise her head boldly and say to Ao Wushuang, But didn't Wang Yuanshan also cultivate to the Jinshin phase at a young age? Ao Wushuang sneered and said, Wang Yuanshan began cultivating in his mother's womb. Before he was born, he was given elixirs. At the age of 14, his young spirit reached the advanced level, and it took him until he was 30 years old to cultivate to the Jinshin phase. Do you know how many elixirs he took in the past 16 years? Just the dregs of the medicine can be piled up to form a Mount Tian long. If it weren't for his great perseverance and wisdom, he wouldn't have been able to cultivate even if he had 2 medicine mountains. Moreover, do you think it's so easy to cultivate to the Jinshin phase? Since ancient times, in order to cultivate to the Jinshin phase, one must have extraordinary cultivation talent, coupled with a large number of elixirs. Only then can one succeed. If one's talent is slightly inferior, no matter how many elixirs there are, it will be useless, unless there is a Dun Jindan. Humph, if a fool takes the Dun Jindan, he can also reach the Jinshin phase. However, is it so easy to refine the Dun Jindan? If Li Yundong wants to cultivate to the Jinshin phase, he either has to pile up elixirs or take the Dun Jindan. In order to reach the Jinshin phase, Wang Yuanshan almost lost the family property of the Linggong sect. If it weren't for Zhang Tianshi, the leader of the Zhengyi school, who saw that he was young and promising and had been supporting him, and his shimmy worked hard to raise funds, how could he have persisted? Hearing this, Su-chan was depressed. Then what should I do? Do I really have to get used to being a burden after the age of 20? Ao Wushuang looked at Su-chan, sighed, and said, It's not that there are no other ways to improve your cultivation, but... Hearing this, Su-chan's eyes lit up and she quickly asked, What is it? Ao Wushuang hesitated for a moment and said, Dual cultivation. Su-chan suddenly looked like a deflated ball and said dejectedly, Isn't that the same as not saying anything? Now Yundong's cultivation is so much higher than mine, and he hasn't cultivated to the Jinshin phase. How can he do dual cultivation? Ao Wushuang glared at Su-chan. What are you thinking? I'm talking about small dual cultivation. Su-chan was stunned, but soon she said disappointedly, I've also thought about this, but every time I take qi from Yundong. If he continues like this, his cultivation will be sucked back by me. Ao Wushuang was so angry that she laughed. What do you know? There are many sects in small dual cultivation. Among them, the Taoist sect in the middle of Sichuan has a secret method of dual cultivation. For example, In the Qingqing secret record, there are cultivation methods of dual cultivation, such as the yin-yang reversal method, the heaven and earth reversal method, the big and small initiation method, the heavens mystery method, the 3 warming cauldron method, the 9 warming cauldron method, and the secret of harvesting. These methods of dual cultivation are suitable for both men and women, and they are mutually beneficial. They can be called divine arts. Su Chan's eyes lit up when she heard this. She couldn't help but say happily, Master, you know this, right? You must know this, right? Ao Wushuang shook her head and said firmly, I don't. Su Chan was disappointed. You don't know? How can you not? If you don't know, then how can your cultivation? Before Su Chan could finish her words, Ao Wushuang couldn't help but say angrily, B****, what did you say? After Wang Yuanshan was captured, I painstakingly trained myself to reach my current cultivation level. At that time, Wang Yuanshan saw that my cultivation was too low, so he gave me his Bahuang sword. Otherwise, with his Bahuang and Liuhe swords in hand, how could he not have escaped when he was caught? Do you think I got my cultivation from dual cultivation? Su Chan lowered her head and looked at Ao Wushuang pitifully. I'm sorry, Master. If you don't know it, who will? What should we do? Ao Wushuang shook her head and said, Nonsense. Since it's the Qingqing secret record, of course it's the Qingqing sect. Su Chan was stunned. The Qingqing sect? We seem to have a grudge with this sect. What if they refuse to lend it to us? Ao Wushuang chuckled and said, You're really stupid. If they don't lend it to us, humph, we'll get it ourselves. Su Chan's eyes lit up. The 2 foxes, one big and one small, looked at each other and laughed wickedly. Chapter 524. After the 2 fox spirits, one big and one small, decided to go to Mount Qingqing to steal the Qingqing secret record, they began to look at each other sneakily and snicker. Go to the internet. 7K. Oath am. Su Chan kept nudging Ao Wushuang with her arms and said with a sneaky smile, Master, why didn't I know that you were a thief? What if someone finds out? As she spoke, she suddenly said nervously, What should we do if Yundong finds out? Ao Wushuang was stunned, but she quickly snorted and said, If he finds out, you can tell him that this is the tradition of our Fox Zen school. Su Chan's eyes widened. Stealing is a tradition of the Fox Zen school? Ao Wushuang said disapprovingly, The founder of our Fox Zen school, Pan Shi, learned his skills by stealing. Why is the mystical silver fox so powerful? Isn't it because she's good at stealing? Besides, we didn't steal these skills to do bad things. Why can't we steal them? Seeing that her master was speaking so confidently, Su Chan didn't take it to heart. Instead, she said excitedly, When are we going? Ao Wushuang looked at the sky and said, We'll go in the evening. Su Chan jumped up and clapped her hands. That's great. We can also eat Yundong's dinner. Ao Wushuang scolded angrily. All you know is to eat. Su Chan made a face at Ao Wushuang and said, Because Yundong cooks delicious food, not like you. Ao Wushuang was about to get angry, but she saw Su Chan rushing out of the room with a smile. She shook her head helplessly. After Su Chan left the room, she saw the little foxes gathered in the living room. Suddenly, a deafening cheer burst out. The little girl was startled. She covered her ears and asked in confusion and astonishment, What's wrong? What happened? Ling Yu grabbed Su Chan with a face full of ecstasy and shook her arm hard. Leader has decided to pass on the heavenly Jin Dan technique to us. Su Chan couldn't help opening her mouth wide. Is he going to teach us the heavenly Jin Dan technique? Lu Yuehong was also surprised and said to Li Yundong, Leader, why? Why do you suddenly want to pass on the heavenly Jin Dan technique to us? Li Yunyang said with a smile, Although this is a magic created by Mr. Naiwen Chen Pu, it can be regarded as one of the legacies left behind by the mystical silver fox. Passing it on to you can be regarded as returning it to its owner. For a moment, everyone in the Fox Zen school cheered. Although Zi Yuan was also smiling, there was a trace of confusion and worry in her eyes. When the 2 of them were busy in the kitchen, Zi Yuan asked while washing vegetables, Why do you want to spread the heavenly Jin Dan technique now? Li Yundong skillfully cut the shredded radish, sighed softly, and said, At the Taoist assembly, the Fox Zen school was the target of public criticism. Although the appearance of the Japanese resolved some of the crisis, The appearance of Yen Fong put the Fox Zen school in the teeth of the storm. In addition, I accidentally split open the Emperor's clock and released many cultivators. I've been thinking about what you said before. If the great calamity of the cultivation world is really caused by you, I think. As he said this, Li Yundong suddenly stopped what he was doing and said worriedly, "If this great calamity is really caused by me, I think I will take the initiative to resign from the position of leader of the Fox Zen school." Zi Yuan's movements also paused, and her body stiffened slightly. She turned her face and asked in surprise, "Are you afraid of getting Su Chan and the others involved?" Li Yundong nodded. "Yes, if it were just me, I wouldn't be afraid. However, from Chao Yi, Lu Yuehong, Su Chan, and the little foxes in the Fox Zen school, they almost have no ability to protect themselves. But fortunately, Ao Wushuang is back. With her strength, she can protect the whole Fox Zen school. But I'm afraid that some very powerful cultivators will come, so I decided to pass on the heavenly Jin Dan technique to them. No matter how high they can cultivate, they will at least have some ability to protect themselves." Zi Yuan sighed slightly. "Actually, about this great calamity, have you ever thought about why Yen Fong wanted to kill Chao Kefi? Yen Fong would rather not take back the Liuhe sword and find a way to kill Chao Kefi? Moreover, when she made her first move, why did Chao Yi appear there? Did she go to save Chao Kefi? If so, why did she go?" Li Yundong said with a serious expression, "I've thought about it, and Chao Yi and I have talked about this in private. But she said that at that time, she had already suspected Zhuang Yiting, so she was always paying attention to her actions. Especially when she found out that Yen Fong had sneaked out and tried to kill Chao Kefi, she helped her." Zi Yuan smiled slightly. "Do you believe her words?" Li Yundong didn't comment and continued to work. The kitchen knife in his hand flew up and down, and the shredded radishes were cut into thin and long pieces by him. Each piece seemed to have been cut by a machine. He said, "Until I confirm whether Lu Yi is really alive or not, or whether he has any ulterior motives, I will be skeptical." Zi Yuan also turned her head and continued with the work at hand. She suddenly said, "Have you ever thought about?" Li Yundong saw that Zi Yuan had suddenly stopped halfway through her words. He turned his head strangely and said with a smile, "What's wrong? What are you thinking about? Why are you so hesitant today?" Zi Yuan looked at Li Yundong seriously and said without blinking, "Have you ever thought about setting up your own sect?" Li Yundong was shocked. "Setting up my own sect? Why?" Zi Yuan turned around and said with a solemn face, "Li Yundong, I know that you are affectionate and righteous, but you should understand that the Fox Zen school is always the so-called evil path. No matter how hard you work, someone will eventually talk about it. Moreover, the blow and trauma that the mystical silver fox caused to the entire cultivation world was too serious. You can't imagine it at all. If the mystical silver fox is really resurrected, the whole cultivation world will regard you as a public enemy. At that time, no matter whether you are a good person or not, no matter what great good deeds you have done in the past, they will attack you crazily until you, the leader of the Fox Zen school, are destroyed and the mystical silver fox is sealed again." Li Yundong also turned around. He thought for a while and said, "I can understand why they are hostile to the Fox Zen school, but what I don't understand is why the whole cultivation world is so hostile and vigilant towards the mystical silver fox. What did she do before?" Zi Yuan hesitated for a moment, her eyes full of hesitation. She thought for a moment, sighed and said, "Forget it. You should have known these things." Zi Yuan stroked her hair and said, "You have stayed in the spirit space for tens of thousands of years and read all kinds of ancient books. But have you found any records about the mystical silver fox?" Li Yundong was also surprised and said, "If you didn't mention it, I wouldn't have noticed it. Now that you mention it, I remember that in the ancient books in the spirit space, there is no mention of the mystical silver fox. Most of them are slanderous to the Fox Zen school. There is only a slight mention of the founder of the Fox Zen school, the Rock Fox." Zi Yuan nodded and said, "That's right. After the Rock Fox founded the Fox Zen school, he defeated many good cultivators with a psychic fan of 7 treasures. Later, these cultivators felt deeply humiliated by being defeated by the fox spirit and began to ruin the reputation of the Fox Zen school everywhere. The next 2 generations of sect leaders were also disappointing, and they made the Fox Zen school a mess. But at this time, the Fox Zen school only had a bad reputation and was a little notorious. It was not a demon that everyone would talk about." Li Yundong said, Until the mystical silver fox appeared? Zi Yuan nodded slightly. Yes. The mystical silver fox was the fourth-generation leader of the Fox Zen school. When she first took over, the whole Fox Zen school was in a mess. Moreover, ever since the Fox Zen school's elder rock had immortalized, the majority of the Fox Zen school's members had been female. Most of the Fox Zen school's Buddhist magic was Buddhist magic, and most female cultivators could not learn the masculine and powerful Buddhist magic. Therefore, after 2 generations, the Buddhist magic of the Fox Zen school had almost been lost. In order to change this situation, the mystical silver fox secretly disguised herself as a nun and sneaked into Mount Wutai to learn Buddhist magic. Li Yundong asked, did she learn it secretly? Zi Yuan nodded and said, the mystical silver fox turned into a nun and secretly learned the Great Vajra technique. However, when she practiced the Great Vajra technique, because it was for men to practice, women would be burned if they practiced it. As a result, the mystical silver fox was possessed by the devil, but later she was saved by the passing Zen master Xueqi in the body of Tong Yang. Later, the mystical silver fox felt grateful for her life-saving grace and was willing to serve her with her body. However, she was severely reprimanded by Zen master Xueqi. You lost your virginity to save others. Although you did evil with them, you had a good heart. However, if you lost your Buddhist heart because of your greed for beauty, although you did good deeds to repay kindness, it was a bad result. Later, Zen master Xueqi chased the mystical silver fox down the mountain. The mystical silver fox was ashamed, resentful, and angry. She felt that Zen master Xueqi despised her because she was a fox demon and her 6 senses were not clean. Therefore, the mystical silver fox swore to cultivate to become an immortal and humiliate Zen master Xueqi. Li Yundong was fascinated and couldn't help sighing. There's such a bad fate? Zi Yuan shook her head with a bitter smile and said, it's nothing. Later, the mystical silver fox turned into a beautiful woman and sneaked into the Taoist holy land of Mount Longhu to learn Taoist magic. Later, because of her natural fox charm, Zhang Guang, the leader of the Xueqi school, fell in love with her. Zhang Guang was obsessed with the mystical silver fox. For this reason, he even abandoned his fiancée, Mao Jiao, who had been engaged to him before he was born. Zhang Guang's actions caused Mao Jiao's father, Mao Kong, the great grandmaster of the Maoshan sect, to be furious. From then on, Mount Longhu and Mount Mao have been at odds with each other, and they have been fighting for more than 10 years. Since then, the southern Taoists have been at odds with each other. Li Yundong couldn't help but say in surprise, is there such a thing? I only know that the southern Taoists seem to be in harmony, but I don't know why. Why haven't I heard of it? I've never seen any records in the spirit space. Zi Yuan sighed and said, the 2 major Taoists became enemies because of a fox spirit. Both sides suffered heavy losses and were ashamed of it. Of course, they didn't talk about it. The Xueqi school even abolished Zhang Guang as the leader and erased any evidence of his reign, as if this person had never appeared. Li Yundong was stunned. He couldn't help but ask, what about the rest? Zi Yuan continued, the mystical silver fox provoked the southern Taoists to start a war. After that, the 2 sects suffered heavy losses. Mao Kong and Mao Jiao were both killed in the battle, and their spirits and bodies were destroyed. Zhang Guang and his disciple also died tragically. After the battle between the Xueqi school and the Maoshan sect, they began to make peace. The 2 major Taoist sects issued a kill order to the mystical silver fox at the same time. From then on, most of the Taoists in the world would kill the people of the Fox Zen school when they saw them. In order to save her life and become stronger, the mystical silver fox turned into an old woman and sneaked into the Qingzhou sect of the Qingzhou Mountain Pavilion. She stole the supreme elixir of Taoism, the Diyuan Jindan and the 3 elixir code. From then on, she gathered the Buddhist Dharma and Taoist magic arts in one body and became a master of both Buddhism and Taoism. After the mystical silver fox achieved great success in cultivation, she came to Mount Wutai and challenged Zen master Xueqi in public as she wished. Zen master Xueqi's spiritual power was greatly reduced because his Tongyang body was broken. He was defeated in the battle. After humiliating him, the mystical silver fox left. 3 days later, Zen master Xueqi died of serious injuries. His successor disciple, Wu Nang, declared that the mystical silver fox was a great enemy of Buddhism and began to discredit the mystical silver fox and her sect on various occasions. Therefore, over time, Fox Zen was derided as Wild Fox Zen by the world. After the mystical silver fox reached the peak of Buddhism and Taoism, she was still unwilling to give up. In order to become stronger at this time, she finally did something that almost caused the cultivation world to fall into a disaster. Li Yundong's expression was awe-inspiring when he heard this. He quickly asked, "What is it?" Just as Zi Yuan was about to speak, the kitchen door was suddenly pulled open. Su Chan said in surprise at the door, "Yundong, there are guests at home." Li Yundong was stunned. "Who's here?" Su Chan said with a strange expression. "Wan Zhenu." Li Yundong and Zi Yuan looked at each other and asked, "What is he doing here?" 8. Yeah. Baidu search. To read the latest chapter, please visit 8 Degrees Bar Updates fastest. Chapter 525. Li Yundong wiped his hands and walked out of the kitchen. Sure enough, he saw Wan Zhenyuan standing in the living room in a suit with a small suitcase in his hand. The little foxes in the room were all looking at the uninvited guest with vigilance and doubt. Go to the internet. 7K. Oath M. 8. Do Baidu search, Master Wan. Although he didn't know the purpose of Wan Zhenyuan's visit, Li Yundong still cupped his hands and said politely with a smile, "How have you been since the Taoist assembly?" Wan Zhenyuan waved his hand and said with a wry smile, "Zhenren Li, don't be so polite. There are no outsiders here, so you don't have to be so polite." Li Yundong smiled slightly and said, "Master Wan, what can I do for you?" Wan Zhenyuan looked around and saw that the living room was full of people, all of whom were looking at him with bright eyes. He thought for a moment and said, "Zhenren Li, can we find a quiet place to talk?" Li Yundong smiled and said, "How about going to my room?" Wan Zhenyuan bowed slightly and said, "Amateus, please lead the way." Under everyone's curious gazes, Li Yundong took Wan Zhenyuan to the room. After closing the door he asked, "Master Wan, there are only the two of us here. Can you tell me what you want now?" Wan Zhenyuan was not in a hurry. He looked around and said with a smile, "Zhenren Li, you are so carefree. In this blessed enclave, with a beauty by your side, you are really as happy as an immortal." Li Yundong remained calm and didn't answer him. He just stared at Wan Zhenyuan. After looking around for a while, Wan Zhenyuan saw that Li Yundong didn't answer, so he coughed dryly and said, "Zhenren Li, let's get straight to the point. I came here to ask you for help." Li Yundong smiled slightly and said, "Master Wan, you really know how to joke. As the largest sect of external alchemy, your Gazao sect has both money and power. What can't you solve? Why did you come to me for help?" Wan Zhenyuan raised his head and laughed. "Zhenren Li, you can't say that. As the saying goes, every dog has its day. Who doesn't need help?" Li Yunyang smiled and said, "Master Wan, what can I do for you?" Wan Zhenyuan nodded slightly. He stroked his goatee with his hand and said with a smile, "Zhenren Li, if I know correctly, the heavenly Jindan technique should be with you, right?" Li Yundong's heart skipped a beat and he thought to himself, "Sure enough, they're here." Li Yundong nodded and said, "Yes, I do." Wan Zhenyuan chuckled and said, "Zhenren Li, I have a presumptuous request." "Well, can you lend me the heavenly Jindan technique?" Li Yunyang frowned slightly. Seeing this, Wan Zhenyuan immediately said, "Zhenren Li, don't worry. I won't let you suffer any losses. If you have any requests, just say it. As long as I, Wan Zhan, can take it out, I will definitely offer it with both hands." Li Yundong laughed in his heart. "The best immortal pen in your hand has been stolen, and the Renyuan Jindan in the past has also been stolen by me. What good things do you have now? Even if there is, how can you guarantee that it won't be robbed again?" Li Yundong chuckled and said, "Master Wan, you must be joking. The heavenly Jindan technique is a secret of the mystical silver fox. How can I make the decision to lend it to outsiders?" Wan Zhenyuan stared at Li Yundong with bright eyes. Suddenly, he smiled meaningfully and said, "Zhenren Li, since we've made it clear, let's be frank. I believe you also understand that the heavenly Jindan technique is not the original work of the Fox Zen school. It is the posthumous work of Mr. Naiwen Chen Pu. Logically speaking, it is a treasure of our Taoist school, and our Gazao sect is an orthodox Taoist sect. I have a reason to ask for a look." When Wan Zhenyuan saw Li Yunyang chuckling and looking a little unfriendly, he immediately said with a smile, "Of course, the mystical silver fox has contributed a lot to the heavenly Jindan technique, and it's a fact that the Fox Zen School has such a secret skill. Therefore, I specially came here to make a deal with you. Zhenren Li, that's a sure win. Li Yundong smiled and said, "What do you mean by a deal?" Wang Jinyuan chuckled and said, "Zhenren Li, the heavenly Jindan technique is of no use to you now. You have already memorized everything you should. But for those of us who have never practiced it, it is invaluable. As long as you lend it to me, I am willing to give you the garden that was once used in the Taoist assembly as a gift. What do you think?" Li Yundong's heart moved slightly. He remembered that Su Chan had once said that she liked the garden and hoped to live in such a garden in the future. At that time, he had thought it was impossible. After all, the land in Dongwu City was expensive, and the garden was located in the center of the city, where every inch of land was expensive. It was impossible to buy it without tens of millions of yuan. Wang Jinyuan was actually willing to spend tens of millions of yuan to buy the heavenly Jindan technique in his hands? Not to mention anything else, if he sold this garden, he would become rich. There was no need to worry about the food of the Fox Zen School. Li Yundong was born in a poor family, so he knew very well the hardships of making money. There was a huge sum of money in front of him. For a moment, no matter how determined Li Yundong was, he couldn't help but feel a little tempted. However, Li Yundong had cultivated a good temper in the spirit space. Although there were waves in his heart, his face was still as calm as water. Seeing that Li Yundong was calm, Wang Jinyuan pondered for a moment. He thought that Li Yundong didn't like it, so he said with a smile, "Of course, Zhenren Li, you are so high that you don't like it. However, I know that because you are short of money, you didn't live in Mount Tianlong anymore, so?" Wang Jinyuan smiled and took out a stack of documents from the small suitcase he carried with him. He said, "I rented Mount Tianlong again. As long as you agree, I can immediately transfer these documents to you without a penny. The Fox Zen School can return to Mount Tianlong today." Li Yundong was suddenly moved. He couldn't help but pick up the stack of documents and take a look. He was shocked in his heart. Wang Jinyuan is really powerful. He can actually cater to my needs to this extent? Seeing that Li Yundong was really tempted, Wang Jinyuan was secretly proud and threw out another heavy bomb. He said, "Zhenren Li, if you think this is not enough, I have another thing that I can exchange with you." Li Yundong calmed down slightly and asked, "What is it?" Wang Jinyuan smiled and said, "The Diyuan Jin Dan." When Li Yundong heard this, no matter how determined he was, he couldn't keep calm. He took a deep breath and said in surprise, "The Diyuan Jin Dan? You have the Diyuan Jin Dan?" Wang Jinyuan smiled slightly and asked non-committally, "Zhenren Li, are you willing to exchange for it?" In Li Yundong's opinion, any of the first two things that Wang Jinyuan had taken out was enough to exchange for the heavenly Jindan technique. Although the heavenly Jindan technique was a priceless treasure, it was only for those cultivators who had never practiced this kind of magic. For people like Li Yundong, who had practiced it and kept a handwritten copy, it was just a rare commodity. However, Wang Jinyuan had not only used a garden worth tens of millions of yuan in Mount Tianlong to exchange for it, but also used the Diyuan Jindan? No matter how precious the heavenly Jindan technique was, it was not as precious as the Diyuan Jindan. Moreover, Li Yundong had heard that Wang Jinyuan wanted to refine the Diyuan Jindan, but he had not succeeded because he lacked a guiding drug. But after not seeing him for a month, had he actually succeeded? The other party's offer was too high, and the conditions were ridiculously generous. Li Yundong became vigilant and asked, "Master Wan, as far as I know, no one has refined the Diyuan Jindan since Liu Bowen in the Ming dynasty. Where did you refine the Diyuan Jindan? Even if you can refine the Diyuan Jindan, you must have other requests besides the heavenly Jindan technique, right?" Wang Jinyuan chuckled and said, "Zhenren Li is really perceptive. You're right, I do have other requests." Seeing that Wang Jinyuan had admitted it, Li Yundong was a little relieved and asked, "What's the matter?" Wang Jinyuan said, "I'm refining the Diyuan Jindan now. As long as you are willing to give me the heavenly Jindan technique and find the guiding drug for me, I will give you the garden of Dongwu City and Mount Tianlong. I will also give you one of the Diyuan Jindan that I refine in the future." Li Yundong was moved, but he quickly calmed down. "You'll give me one? The Diyuan Jindan is such a precious elixir. How many can you refine in one furnace? What if I can only refine one?" Wang Jinyuan chuckled and said, "Zhenren Li, you worry too much. It's already amazing for ordinary external alchemy to be able to refine one elixir in one furnace. But our Gazao sect can refine at least 2 elixirs in one furnace. Sometimes, we can even refine 9 elixirs in one furnace. Li Yundong couldn't help but say with some admiration, "Amazing." As expected of the leading sect of external alchemy. Good means good Taoism. Wang Jinyuan laughed proudly and said, "Thank you for your praise, Zhenren Li. I don't deserve it." However, Li Yundong suddenly asked, "But Master Wan, what is this guiding drug? And where is it? There are so many people. Why did you ask me?" Wang Jinyuan said with a smile, "Zhenren Li, I expected you to ask this. This guiding drug is a 1,000-year-old snow lotus, which can only be found in the holy mountain of Xueqi in Tibet." Li Yundong asked in confusion, "Since you know what the guiding drug is and where it is, why don't you find it yourself?" Wang Jinyuan couldn't help sighing and said, "Zhenren Li, do you really not know or are you pretending?" Li Yundong cupped his hands and said, "Master Wan, please explain." Wang Jinyuan stared at Li Yundong for a while and said, "Zhenren Li, since the Manchus entered the Qing dynasty, the Buddhism of the Central Plains and our Taoism have been suppressed one after another. The power of the cultivation world has been declining, and the power of Tibetan Buddhism has been flourishing. Although the power of Tibetan Buddhism has returned to Tibet after the founding of the People's Republic of China, the 3 parties have been secretly hostile to each other. This is a reality that everyone knows. This 1,000-year-old snow lotus is a sacred object of the Tibetan esoteric sect, and it grows on the holy mountain. It is protected by the mountain-protecting monks and mountain gods of the esoteric sect. Do you think that anyone can go up and take it away?" Li Yundong became more and more surprised. He asked, "Then how do you know that I will definitely be able to go up and take it away?" Wang Jinyuan looked at Li Yundong meaningfully and said with a smile, "Zhenren Li, I heard that the newly found Bonda Lam of the Tibetan esoteric sect. She is your good friend." Li Yundong's heart suddenly trembled. He suddenly shouted, "How did you know?" Wang Jinyuan laughed and said, "Zhenren Li, when you were unknown in the past, no one knew what you had done. Now that you are famous all over the world, there is no place to hide anything from you. Who wouldn't know?" Li Yunyang stared at Wang Jinyuan suspiciously and asked, "You mean, if I give you the heavenly Jindan technique and this 1,000-year-old snow lotus, you will transfer the gardens of Dongwu City and Mount Tianlong to me and give me a Dun Jindan, right?" Wang Jinyuan smiled and said, "Yes. However, Zhenren Li, even if you don't take the 1,000-year-old snow lotus, I'm willing to exchange the gardens of Dongwu City and Mount Tianlong for the heavenly Jindan technique. As for the Dun Jindan, it depends on whether you, Zhenren Li, are interested in it." 8. Yeah. Baidu search. To read the latest chapter, please visit 8 degrees bar updates fastest. Chapter 526. After sending Wang Jinyuan away, although Li Yundong knew that Su Chan, Zi Yuan, and the others were very curious about Wang Jinyuan's purpose, he still calmly talked about it. After dinner, when Li Yundong saw that everyone had returned to their rooms, he called Zi Yuan to the balcony and told her about Wang Jinyuan's purpose. Go to the internet. 7K. Oath M. This website has changed its domain name. After listening to Li Yundong's words, Zi Yuan asked in surprise, "Did you refuse?" Li Yundong shook his head. "No, I just said that I would think about it. However, Wang Jinyuan, like Du Fei, doesn't want me to transfer the heavenly Jindan technique to others." Zi Yuan smiled slightly, and there was a hint of sarcasm at the corner of her mouth. They don't want the opponents of their sects to become stronger and stronger. The heavenly Jindan technique has become a hot commodity now. Are you going to wait for the highest price? Li Yundong sighed softly. "No, I'm just doubting Wang Jinyuan's purpose. Don't you think it's too coincidental?" Zi Yuan couldn't help but ask, "Are you worried?" Li Yundong continued her words and said, "Yes, I always feel that these things happen one after another, one after another. It's very strange and very coincidental. Wang Jinyuan's Dun Jindan happens to lack a guiding drug, and this guiding drug happens to be the 1,000-year-old snow lotus. This 1,000-year-old snow lotus happens to be in the holy mountain of Tibet, and the esoteric sect in charge of the holy mountain welcomes Bonda Lam, who happens to be Mei Duo, whom I met when I was in the Zhuji phase. Isn't this too strange?" Zi Yuan thought for a moment and frowned slightly. Indeed, these things are like exquisite mechanical parts, one ring after another, and they are all intertwined with each other. But this doesn't rule out the possibility that it's a coincidence. Li Yundong shook his head. But all of this seems to be too coincidental. It's so coincidental that someone deliberately created such a situation, as if there was a pair of hands behind the scenes adding fuel to the fire. Do you still remember the 2 big golden snakes that were stolen? You once told me that if I want to refine the Dun Jindan, I must have the Niden of the big golden snake as a guiding drug. Otherwise it will be impossible to succeed. Do you remember? Zi Yuan nodded. I remember. Li Yundong said, Wan Jinyuan must have something to do with the person who stole the golden snake. And the person who had stolen the big golden snake must have some kind of connection with a series of things that had happened to the Fox Zen school. If this person was Lu Yi, why would he do this? Is it because he wants to resurrect the mystical silver fox? If so, what did the Dun Jindan have to do with the mystical silver fox? Why did Yen Fong want to kill Xueqi at all costs? Could it be? After pondering for a while, Zi Yuan said, when I first saw Xueqi, I felt that there was something wrong with her. Ordinary people have 3 spiritual and 7 physical souls, but she only has 1 spiritual and 3 physical souls. Moreover, Yen Fong once said that the soul of the mystical silver fox had been shattered, and she had been trying to kill Xueqi at all costs after seeing her. Do you think there is any connection between them? Li Jiandong's face was sullen and he didn't speak for a long time. After a long time he said in a cold voice, Do you want a sage? President Chowj. No, Xueqi is the mystical silver fox? Zi Yuan shook her head and said, No, that's not necessarily true. I just think that the mystical silver fox must have something to do with Xueqi, but it's not necessarily her. It may also be the soul of the mystical silver fox that escaped, or it may be that she was born with a weak body and had fewer souls than others. Li Jiandong didn't comment. He was silent for a long time and didn't say a word. Seeing that Li Jiandong's eyebrows were knitted together, she couldn't help but sigh slightly and say, Others call you invincible, Li, and they see that you are surrounded by beautiful women. At the Taoist assembly, you even showed your divine power and became famous all over the world. But who knows that you seem to be very glorious now, but in fact, you are like walking on thin ice in front of an abyss, and you are in danger of being doomed eternally at any time. Li Jiandong let out a long sigh. He looked at the closed door of the room of Suchan and the others and sighed. Those who know me say that I am worried, and those who don't know me say that I want nothing. You know me best. Listening to Li Jiandong's sigh, Zi Yuan didn't know why, but she suddenly felt warm in her heart, as if there was a faint warm current flowing in her heart. It was as if she felt gratified and happy to be able to share the worries and difficulties of this young cultivator. She smiled slightly and said, Don't worry. So many troubles have come over in the past. Now that you have become so strong, you are afraid of everything? Hearing this, Li Jiandong also chuckled. Just as he was about to speak, he suddenly saw 2 beams of green light flash across the roof, quickly crossing the sky and disappearing into the horizon. Li Jiandong was stunned. Who is that? Zi Yuan also looked surprised and said, I saw the figures just now. It seems to be Su Chan and Ao Wushuang. Li Jiandong was surprised. It's so late. What are they doing out? Zi Yuan smiled and said, Maybe they are reunited and going out to relax? Don't worry. With Ao Wushuang around, Su Chan can't do anything. Li Jiandong couldn't help laughing. You're right. I wanted to follow them and have a look, but now it seems that I was overthinking. Zi Yuan laughed and said, After all, Su Chan is still young and has a child's personality. But she has grown up a lot. She will slowly become more mature and sensible. You don't have to worry about her. Speaking of this, Zi Yuan suddenly thought of something. If Su Chan grows up to be a 9-tailed celestial fox in the future, the cultivation world will kill her. What will you do? But just as Zi Yuan was about to say this to Li Yundong, she suddenly saw the doting and sweet smile on Li Yundong's face when he talked about Su Chan, so she swallowed the words on the tip of her tongue and sighed in her heart. Li Jiandong didn't know what Zi Yuan was thinking. He looked in the direction in which Su Chan and Ao Wushuang had left with a smile and said, Forget it, let's go in. Anyway, Su Chan has her master with her. Her master can't take her to cause trouble, can he? Neither Li Jiandong nor Zi Yuan knew that what Su Chan and Ao Wushuang wanted to do was far more than just causing trouble. The 2 fox spirits, one big and one small, turned into two beams of cyan light and flew into the sky in the blink of an eye. It was winter, the season with the least thunderstorms. The two of them were not afraid of anything, so they flew very high. The two of them flew for a long time. When they landed, they were already in the territory of Western Sichuan. Ao Wushuang took Su Chan's hand and slowly landed. She said with a smile, "Chan'er, how long has it been since we flew together like this?" "It's been a long time," Su Chan said with a smile. She looked around and found that she was already in a lush forest. She asked curiously, "Is this Mount Qingqing?" Ao Wushuang also looked around. She couldn't help but sigh and say, "Yes. Look at the green trees around, surrounded by peaks, like a city, like a forest city, so people call it Mount Qingqing. Alas, I've been here a long time ago. I didn't expect that this place hasn't changed at all." Su Chan took Ao Wushuang's hand curiously and asked, "Master, have you been here before?" Ao Wushuang nodded slightly. "Yes, I have." Su Chan asked again, "What are you doing here?" Ao Wushuang sighed softly and said, "I came to travel with Wang Yuan Shanch." Su Chan immediately shut her mouth and didn't ask any more questions, so as not to remind Ao Wushuang of the sad things of the past. However, Ao Wushuang sighed with emotion and said, "I've always wanted to take you here to have a look, but I never had the time. Look, in the depths of Mount Qingqing, there is Shangqing Palace. From the foot of the mountain to the Taoist temple, there are thousands of stairs and winding paths. There is a quiet and elegant feeling everywhere. Therefore, Mount Qingqing also has the reputation of Qingqing is the most secluded place in the world." Su Chan followed Ao Wushuang's gaze and saw a looming sign of a Taoist temple in the depths of the mountain. The cornices of the building were arched in the green forest, revealing a small horn under the faint starlight and moonlight. Su Chan saw that Mount Qingqing was surrounded by green mountains, undulating peaks, valleys, and Taoist temples. At first glance, although it was not as majestic as Mount Longhu, it made people feel especially peaceful and empty in such an environment. The little girl took a deep breath and couldn't help sighing. What a good place. No wonder it is as famous as the dangerous Sword Gate, the beautiful Amei, and the magnificent Kuei Gate. Cultivating in such a place is really half the effort and twice the result. It would be great if our Fox Zen school could have such a good place for cultivation. Ao Wushuang also sighed and said, "Stop dreaming. For thousands of years, the first thing the ancestors of every sect in the cultivation world had to do before establishing a sect was to occupy a mountain and become the king. After so many years, the treasured land of Mount Lingshan has long been robbed. It's not easy for us to have Mount Tianlong, but now we can't live there anymore. Alas, our Fox Zen school has suffered too many disasters." Su Chan also sighed with Ao Wushuang with a sad face, but she was optimistic and cheerful by nature. Soon, she took Ao Wushuang's arm and said with a smile, "Don't worry, Yundong said that he would get Mount Tianlong back." Ao Wushuang chuckled and said, "I don't doubt his ability, but I doubt whether you have the ability to keep an eye on him." Su Chan suddenly pouted and felt unhappy in her heart. But soon, she anxiously pulled Ao Wushuang's arm and urged, "So master, you have to teach me the dual cultivation method as soon as possible. Otherwise, if I really become a burden, Yundong won't want me anymore." Ao Wushuang had experienced the vicissitudes of life and had seen the world of mortals. She knew very well that Li Yundong's character and temper were the same as Wang Yuanshan's. They were both affectionate and righteous, but Wang Yuanshan was more elegant and never lost his temper. From Su Chan's description, Ao Wushuang knew that Li Yundong was a temperamental person. He was usually gentle and elegant, but once someone touched his reverse scale, he would become furious. Ao Wushuang's heart was as clear as a mirror, and she was also confident that her eyes would not be wrong. A person like Li Yundong would never despise Su Chan because her cultivation could not keep up. However, Ao Wushuang was very happy to see Su Chan force herself to cultivate and improve her strength because of this unnecessary sense of crisis. Therefore, Ao Wushuang knew it very well, but she deliberately didn't point it out. Instead, she said with a smile, "Now you know how to be anxious? Don't worry, don't worry. Let me think, where would the Qingqing secret record be hidden?" When Su Chan heard this, her anxious heart suddenly cooled down. She said in surprise, "Ah? You don't know where the Qingqing secret record is hidden? Then what are we doing here? Searching the mountain." Ao Wushuang thought for a moment and said, Is it hidden in Jianfu Palace? Or is it hidden in the Supreme Lord Pavilion? Could it be hidden in the Yuanming Palace? No, such an important thing should be hidden in the Shangqing Palace. Hey, could it be in the Taoist Master Cave? Su Chan's eyes widened when she heard this, and she couldn't help but say in her heart, "Oh my God, I thought I was quite unreliable, but I didn't expect. Master is even more unreliable than me." Chapter 527. When Ao Wushuang saw Su Chan's expression, she guessed what she was thinking. She couldn't help but say angrily, "What are you thinking about?" Su Chan came to her senses and said with a dry smile, "Master, don't tell me you don't remember where the Qingqing secret record is hidden?" Ao Wushuang scolded with a smile. "You wicked girl, how can I not remember? I'm teasing you on purpose. The last time I came with Wang Yuanshan, I remember that he once told me that the ancient books of the Qingqing sect are generally hidden in the Laojun Pavilion. Go to the 8. But I don't know if it has changed after so many years." Su Chan pouted and muttered in a low voice. "Is there any difference? Isn't it still unreliable?" Ao Wushuang couldn't help but say angrily, "Nonsense, it's been 10 years. How can I guarantee that the Qingqing secret record will be in the same place? Do you want to learn it or not?" Seeing that her master was angry, Su Chan immediately smiled apologetically and said, "Don't be angry, master. Let's go to the Laojun Pavilion and have a look first, okay?" Ao Wushuang snorted, took out a Nyan goddess seal from her arms, and used it. Then she pretended to be angry and glared at Su Chan, "Hurry up and adjust your breath. Don't reveal any of your breath. Otherwise, if people know that someone from our Fox Zen school has been here, the world will be in chaos." Su Chan made a face at Ao Wushuang and said proudly, "I don't have other skills, but my ability to hide and escape is top-notch in the world." Ao Wushuang snorted and said solemnly, "Don't be careless. Mount Qingqing is one of the birthplaces of our Chinese Taoism, and it is also the base of the ancestral court of Zhengyi school and the Qingqing sect. Although the Qingqing sect has been forced to move to the Qingyang Palace by the Zhengyi school, the power of Mount Qingqing is far greater than that of other sects. If some hidden dragon or crouching tiger expert discovers even the slightest clue, we will all be consigned to eternal damnation. You don't want to cause trouble for Li Yundong, do you?" Su Chan had been listening casually, but her last words suddenly moved her. Her heart suddenly trembled and she thought to herself, "I can't cause any more trouble for Yundong. Otherwise, even if he can forgive me, I won't be able to forgive myself." The smile on the little girl's face gradually disappeared and was replaced by an extremely cautious expression. Seeing this, Ao Wushuang was relieved. She knew that her disciple was talented, but because of her playfulness, she often couldn't concentrate on one thing. But once she could concentrate all her strength and attention on one thing, she could often do better than anyone else. Otherwise, she would not have been able to escape from Yen Fong. Su Chan and Ao Wushuang looked at each other and nodded seriously. Then, with the help of the invisibility effect of the goddess Nyan seal, they climbed up the 1,000-step ladder. Halfway up the mountain, when they passed the building sign of Mount Qingqing, Ao Wushuang whispered to Su Chan, "We're almost there. I remember that there should have been 2 pine trees in front of us the last time I came here. You must be careful later." These 2 pine trees were transformed by the Taoist priests of the Qingqing sect. Their purpose is to monitor passers-by. Once they discover any uninvited guests, they will immediately inform the monastery. Su Chan said in surprise, "Master, you're amazing. How did you find out?" Ao Wushuang smiled self-deprecatingly. "How could I find out? It was Wang Yuanshan who discovered it. He is a Jinshin master of the Xianmen sect. This kind of illusion technique is just a small trick in his eyes." Su Chan secretly stuck out her tongue and couldn't help but be curious. How powerful is this master of the Jinshin phase? The 2 of them walked up the stairs, but after walking for a while, they arrived in front of the arched building, only to see that the building was standing alone on the pill stairs. There were no trees on either side of it. Su Chan said in surprise, "Master, there are no pine trees you mentioned." Ao Wushuang couldn't help but be stunned. "It's strange. Where did these 2 welcome pines go?" Su Chan giggled and said in a low voice, "Master, could it be that you remembered wrongly?" Ao Wushuang shook her head and said, "Absolutely impossible. At that time, Wang Yuanshan specially pointed out the illusion technique of these two Taoist priests. How could I remember wrongly? Su Chan rolled her eyes and said with a smile. Could it be that the Taoist priests of the Qingqing sect felt that they had lost face after being pointed out by Wang Yuanshan, so they no longer transformed into welcome pines? Although Ao Wushuang didn't believe Su Chan's explanation, she really couldn't find any other good reason. She could only say maybe so. Let's not care about that anymore. Let's continue forward. The two of them climbed up the ladder again and finally arrived at the top of Peng Zufeng, the highest peak of Mount Qingqing. Su Chan saw a round tower with a base of about 400 square meters and a total of 6 floors standing in front of her. This round tower was round at the top and round at the bottom, taking the meaning of the 8 trigrams of heaven and earth. Its appearance was pagoda-shaped, with 3 ingots at the top, taking the meaning of heaven, earth, and man. There was a gray stone tablet at the bottom of the tower. Under the moonlight, one could clearly see the 3 golden characters engraved on it. It was the Supreme Lord Pavilion. Su Chan only felt a solemn aura coming towards her. She couldn't help hiding behind Ao Wushuang and whispered, "Master, is it here?" Ao Wushuang couldn't help looking around in surprise. She whispered, "That's not right. Why is there no one here?" Su Chan was also surprised. "It's so late. Shouldn't they all go back to sleep?" Ao Wushuang shook her head like a rattle drum. "Are you kidding? This is Mount Qingqing, a place that can be compared with Mount Longhu. Even if it's late at night, there will be Taoist priests on duty. How could there be no one here?" Su Chan blinked and said, "But, Master, if there's really no one here, wouldn't it be more convenient for us to steal?" "Well, no, take it? Well, wouldn't it be more convenient for us to get the Qingqing secret record?" Ao Wushuang said in a low voice, "That's true, but why do I feel that something is wrong in my heart?" Foxes were suspicious by nature. Hearing Ao Wushuang's words, Su Chan also became vigilant. She said in a low voice, "Then let's see what happens first." Ao Wushuang nodded, and the two of them quietly guarded a remote corner, looking around vigilantly. However, the two of them had been guarding for more than an hour, but there was no movement around them at all. There was only the sound of insects in the jungle, and the forest was so quiet that it was almost strange. Su Chan couldn't help but whisper, "Master, is it possible that there's really no one here?" Ao Wushuang said flatly, "No. This old Supreme Lord Pavilion is an important place for the Qingqing sect to hide the scriptures. It's absolutely impossible for there to be no one here. How could there not be a single Taoist priest on duty for more than an hour?" Su Chan whispered, "Then, Master, could it be that the Taoist priest on duty has neglected his duty?" Ao Wushuang was stunned for a moment. She thought for a moment and said, "That's also possible. But I still feel that something is wrong. Chaner, wait here for a moment. I'll go and have a look." Su Chan knew that her master was much more capable than her. Even if there was a trap here, she had a way to get out. She nodded and whispered nervously, "Master, you have to be careful." Ao Wushuang nodded and warned, "If anything happens to me later, don't come to save me. You must find a way to escape. If you escape, someone will come to save me. If both of us are trapped here, we won't be able to call for help even if we cry for help." Hearing this, Su Chan's heart tightened. She grabbed Ao Wushuang's hand and whispered, "Master, why don't we not take the Qingqing secret record?" Ao Wushuang glared at Su Chan and said, "We've already come here. How can we turn around and leave? Don't you understand that the arrow is on the bowstring and has to be shot? Besides, how can you catch a tiger cub without entering the tiger's den?" After that, Ao Wushuang jumped out in an instant. Su Chan saw that her master had used the goddess Nyan seal as a cover. The air around her only twisted slightly, and then she could no longer see her figure. Su Chan looked around nervously. Her eyes were wide open, and she felt that time was passing so slowly that every second felt as long as a century. When she was about to lose control and go out to look for Ao Wushuang, she suddenly felt a gust of wind blowing toward her. Su Chan was shocked and was about to be on guard when she saw Ao Wushuang appear beside her. Su Chan was overjoyed. She quickly grabbed her hand and whispered happily, "Master, you're back. I was so worried. Have you found it?" Ao Wushuang's face was full of suspicion. She shook her head and said, "No." In the past, the Qingqing sect hid the ancient books in the statue of the Supreme Elder in the Supreme Elder Pavilion. When I went in just now, it was empty. Obviously, someone had moved all the classics away. Xueqi asked curiously, Master, how did you know that these ancient books were hidden here? Ao Wushuang smiled and said, when I used to travel here with Wang Yuanshan, I was like you at that time. I was not afraid of anything, so I proposed to go to the Qingqing sect to explore. As a result, the two of us found the hiding place of the ancient books of the Qingqing sect. However, at that time, the security was very tight, and there were often Taoist priests on night patrol. Moreover, there were also magic formations around to protect it. As she spoke, Ao Wushuang's expression gradually became serious. But this time, I found that not only were there no Taoist priests on night duty, but the surrounding magic formations seemed to have lost their effect. Xueqi thought for a moment and asked in a low voice, Master, what should we do now? Ao Wushuang thought for a moment and said, let's go to the Taoist Master Cave and have a look. If the Qingqing sect wants to transfer the ancient books, they should be hidden in the Taoist Master Cave. Xueqi whispered, could they have been transferred to the Qingyang Palace? Ao Wushuang shook her head and said, no, the ancient books should not leave the ancestral court. This is the ancestral teaching of every cultivation sect. People can leave, but this kind of ancient book will not be moved, unless there is a great disaster that will destroy the whole sect. Xueqi blinked and said, then let's go to the Taoist Master Cave and have a look. Ao Wushuang nodded, and the two of them got up and ran down the mountain, arriving near the Taoist Master Cave in Qingqing. Xueqi saw that the Taoist Master Cave was surrounded by mountains on 3 sides and a stream on 1 side. In front of it was the main hall, the 3 Pristines Hall, and behind the 3 Pristines Hall was the 3 Emperors Hall. Behind the 3 Emperors Hall was the Taoist Master Cave. In front of the cave, there was an ancient tree more than 50 meters high towering into the sky, which was magnificent. Xueqi sighed in her heart, but just as she was sighing at the beauty and majesty of this Taoist blessed land, she suddenly smelled blood in the air. Xueqi was stunned and couldn't help but whisper, Master, do you smell anything? Ao Wushuang also frowned. There's a smell of blood? The two of them looked at each other and saw the surprise in each other's eyes. Why is there a smell of blood in this Taoist blessed land, the Taoist Master Cave? Xueqi looked around. At this time, she only felt that the silence around her was making her hair stand on end. The little girl was flustered and whispered, Master, let's go back. Don't look for the Qingqing secret record anymore. I feel that something is wrong. Ao Wushuang's face was solemn. She said in a low voice, it's because something is wrong that we have to find out. There's no reason why there are no Taoist priests near the Taoist Master Cave. Let's go and have a look. As she spoke, she took the lead and walked ahead. Xueqi tightly held onto the corner of Ao Wushuang's clothes and followed her carefully, looking around vigilantly and nervously. The two of them walked forward for a while, and Ao Wushuang suddenly stopped. She squatted down, scratched the blue stone pavement with her hand, and then put it in front of her nose to sniff. With the help of the moonlight, Xueqi could see that Ao Wushuang's fingertips were black, which was obviously blood. Xueqi asked in surprise, is it blood? Ao Wushuang's face darkened and she nodded. Yes. After that, Ao Wushuang led Xueqi forward again. The two of them walked along the wall and saw that the incense burner had overturned. The ground was littered with broken swords, broken horsetail whisks, and messy bloodstains. The deeper they went, the more bloodstains there were, and the messier the scene became. Xueqi was so frightened that her pretty face turned pale. She followed Ao Wushuang step by step, not daring to look around. She just lowered her head, but she saw that there were more and more bloodstains on the blue stone ground, as if the ground was covered with a thick blood-red carpet. The two of them seemed to be walking step by step from the human world to the Azura hell. The more the little girl walked, the more afraid she became, and her whole body couldn't help trembling. Just as she was about to pull Ao Wushuang and persuade her to leave, she suddenly found that Ao Wushuang had stopped and was standing still. Xueqi was stunned. She pulled Ao Wushuang and asked in a low voice, Master, what's wrong? Ao Wushuang didn't say a word, as if her whole body had been petrified. Xueqi boldly poked her head out from behind her and took a look. When she saw it, she was so shocked that her whole body trembled and her teeth began to chatter. Xueqi seemed to have seen a scene from hell. She said in a trembling voice, How could this be? 8. Do Baidu search. Chapter 528. In the deep night, the cold moonlight shone on the front of the Taoist master cave in Mount Qingqing. Su Chan and Ao Wushuang stood motionless like two stone statues. Go to the net. 7K. Oath M. About 20 meters in front of them, there were about 40 or 50 corpses. Most of them were wearing Taoist robes, and their bodies were stained with blood. Their corpses had been piled up into a pagoda. Under the pagoda, blood flowed like a river. The moon in the sky was reflected in the blood river, which looked particularly ferocious and terrible. Both Su Chan and Ao Wushuang were stunned by the scene in front of them. Ao Wushuang said in horror, "Who is so bold as to massacre Mount Qingqing? Are they tired of living? This is a terrible tragedy in the cultivation world. Which sect would have the guts to commit such a huge murder?" Su Chan couldn't help but tremble. Her hands tightly grabbed the corner of Ao Wushuang's clothes. Her teeth were chattering and she was about to speak, but Ao Wushuang suddenly covered her mouth. Ao Wushuang pulled Su Chan and quickly hid in the shadows in a corner. She whispered in Su Chan's ear in a very low voice, "Someone is coming." As soon as she finished speaking, she saw a black shadow quickly going up the mountain. Su Chan widened her eyes and looked at the figure. She saw that the figure was tall and dressed in black. He was carrying two bodies covered in blood on his shoulders. Although the man was carrying two adults on his shoulders, he was still walking as if he was flying. In a few steps, he arrived in front of the pagoda. With a shake of his arms, he threw the people on his shoulders onto the pagoda. Su Chan was so scared that she was trembling all over. She quietly wrote on Ao Wushuang's back. She was so scared that her arms were trembling, and her fingers were crooked as she wrote several times. Only then did Ao Wushuang barely recognize what she wanted to say. "Master, what's going on?" Ao Wushuang's face was as dark as water. She waved her hand at Su Chan, signaling her not to ask. Su Chan wrote on her back with a trembling hand, "Master, shall we go? I'm so scared." Ao Wushuang said in a low voice, "We can't go. This person dared to massacre Mount Qingqing, so he must not be easy to deal with. If we move, I'm afraid we will attract his attention. You must not move at this time, or you will be killed." Su Chan knew that Ao Wushuang was right. She calmed down a little and stared at the mysterious man in black with her eyes wide open. She was on guard, as if she would run away at all costs if the man in black showed any signs of discovering her. After the man in black piled up the corpses, he looked around and sneered. He bent down, stepped on a corpse with one foot, and tore off a broken arm from a corpse. Then, using the blood flowing from the wound of the broken arm as ink, he began to wave his arm and write on a golden wall at the entrance of the Celestial Master Cave. Ao Wushuang saw that the man in black hadn't noticed them, and his back was facing them. She pulled Su Chan's arm and whispered, "Chaner, hold your breath. Let's go." Su Chan couldn't wait to grow wings and fly away from here, so when she heard Ao Wushuang's words, she immediately nodded her head like a chick pecking rice. Just as the two of them were about to leave, Su Chan was shocked and full of questions. She thought to herself, "Who the hell is this? Does he have such a deep blood feud with the Qingqing sect? It's not enough to kill people, but also to stack the corpses into a pagoda?" Thinking of this, Su Chan couldn't help but look back. It would have been better if she hadn't seen it, but as soon as she saw it, Su Chan's soul almost flew out of her body. The man used blood as ink and his broken arm as a pen to write a few big words on the wall. The black fox reappears, and the world is in chaos. Then, a few small words were written below. The killer, Li Yundong. Su Chan was so shocked that she couldn't help shouting, "Impossible!" Her shout immediately made the man in black turn his head abruptly. He covered his face with a black scarf, and his cold and stern eyes were like those of a devil from hell. They were full of murderous intent, and they glared at Su Chan like arrows. As soon as he glared at her, his eyes, which were like two daggers, seemed to pierce through space and instantly pierced into Su Chan's eye sockets. She screamed in pain, closed her eyes, and squatted down with her hands covering her chest in pain. The black-clothed man stomped his foot, and the hard blue stone ground beneath his feet sank with a rumble. It was as if a giant had stomped on the ground out of thin air. Countless cracks spread rapidly in all directions, and the black-clothed man's body shot towards Su Chan like a cannonball. Ao Wushuang was shocked. She immediately stood in front of Su Chan and pushed Su Chan away with one hand. She instantly flipped the 5 fingers of her other hand, pinched a lotus finger incantation, and released an earth magic. In an instant, a stone wall made of bluestone appeared in front of her. But the man in black still didn't stop moving. He slammed into the stone wall. The hard bluestone wall, which was more than a foot thick, was as brittle as a paper screen, and was broken by him in one blow. The man in black suddenly turned over his palm and slapped Ao Wushuang in the face. Although Ao Wushuang was still protected by the goddess Nyan's seal at this time, the position of the man in black's palm almost covered all her dodging angles, so she had nowhere to hide. She had no choice but to meet it with both palms. With a bang, Ao Wushuang felt as if she had been hit by a high-speed train. She flew out without saying a word. The man in black had sent Ao Wushuang flying with one palm, but he was stunned. Ha! But this surprise only lasted for a moment, and he suddenly stared at Su Chan. At this time, Su Chan had been pushed by Ao Wushuang and was falling on the bluestone floor covered with blood. Her whole body was weak and she wanted to escape from this place, but the man in black in front of her was too terrifying. His powerful aura and Xueqi were like an invisible giant hand pressing down on her, making her like a mosquito caught in a spider web. No matter how hard she struggled, she couldn't escape. Seeing Ao Wushuang being sent flying by the man in black, Su Chan said desperately in her heart, "This man is too strong. He's even more powerful than Yun Dong. Even Yun Dong can't send my master flying with one palm. What should I do? Am I going to die here?" Just as she was panicking, she heard the man in black suddenly shout, "Show yourself!" The man in black roared fiercely. Suddenly, it was as if an air cannon had exploded in front of him, instantly driving away the goddess Nyan's seal in front of Su Chan. In front of him, a pretty little girl in a long dress appeared. She was a pitiful little girl. When the man in black saw Su Chan, he was stunned again, but before he could react, he heard a stern shout. "You're courting death. How dare you touch her?" After that, a gust of wind came. Even the man in black suddenly felt a chill run down his spine, as if a giant beast was pouncing on him. Without thinking, the man in black retreated lightly. Almost in an instant, the place where he had been was stomped to pieces by a 3-meter-tall, snow-white white fox with 7 tails. This 7-tailed white fox was Ao Wushuang. She was eager to save her disciple, so she desperately showed her true form. At this time, she was baring her teeth, and all the hair on her body was standing on end. Her golden pupils were staring at the man in black in front of her fiercely and angrily. Her cold and sharp teeth looked ferocious and cold under the cold moonlight. This was the first time that Su Chan had seen her master show her true form. She suddenly widened her eyes and cried out in surprise, "Master!" Ao Wushuang didn't even turn her head. She shouted sternly, "What are you waiting for? Run!" Su Chan said in a trembling voice, "Master, what are you going to do?" Ao Wushuang was furious. "Nonsense, I told you to run, so you ran." After that, she roared and pounced on the man in black. However, the man in black laughed out loud. He moved and dodged in the blink of an eye. His figure was as fast as lightning, and he kept dodging and moving under Ao Wushuang's storm-like attacks, as if there were dozens of clones and shadows in the field. Ao Wushuang wanted to buy time for Su Chan, but what made her feel strange was that the man in front of her had been full of murderous intent just now, but now he was just dodging, and there was no longer any murderous intent in his aura. The realm of the 7-tailed fox spirit could be said to be at the top of the Yang spirit level. As long as she did not encounter a Jinshin master, even if she encountered someone stronger than her, the fox spirit could still transform into her true form, which would greatly increase her strength. Thus, she could easily overwhelm her opponent with her tyrannical physical strength. Especially when the 7-tailed fox spirit revealed her true form, she could even fight with a Jinshin master. After Ao Wushuang revealed her true form, the other party just dodged and did not fight back. Moreover, he dodged more than enough, as if he was a cat playing with a mouse. Ao Wushuang was shocked and angry. She gritted her teeth, and suddenly, a green light flashed behind her. In the blink of an eye, the Bahuang sword turned into a bolt of lightning and went straight to the face of the man in black. This move was as fast as lightning, as powerful as thunder, and without warning. It was really the trump card of the trump card. If others didn't know that Ao Wushuang had such a powerful magical weapon, 10 out of 10 of them would have been hit. However, the man in black seemed to have expected that she still had such a trump card. He suddenly clapped his hands and firmly slapped the Bahuang sword into his palm, making it hover at the tip of his nose and unable to move any further. When Ao Wushuang saw that her killing move had been blocked by the other party, she was overjoyed and shouted, "You're courting death." In an instant, the Bahuang sword clanged. Then, one sword became two swords became three swords, and three swords became countless swords. They quickly formed a fast-spinning iron lotus flower. Each petal of the iron lotus flower was like a violently rotating sawtooth. As long as anything touched it, it would be mercilessly minced. The man in black grabbed the Bahuang sword and was instantly sucked into the high-speed spinning iron lotus flower. Then his body was quickly minced. Great! Su Chan, who was about to escape, suddenly saw this scene and immediately exclaimed with joy. But as soon as Su Chan finished speaking, she heard a cold snort. Insignificant skill. Su Chan and Ao Wushuang turned their heads and saw the man in black standing quietly not far away, looking at them coldly with his hands behind his back, as if what had just been minced was just his shadow. How is this possible? Su Chan was so shocked that her pretty face turned pale. For a moment, her mind went blank. She wished she could disappear from there in the next second, but her feet were as heavy as a boulder. No matter how hard she tried, she couldn't move them. Ao Wushuang took a deep breath. She knew that she had encountered a terrifying enemy that she had never seen before. She narrowed her eyes slightly, adjusted her position, and still protected Su Chan with her body. Ao Wushuang said coldly, "Who the hell are you?" The man in black looked at Ao Wushuang coldly. He suddenly snorted and sneered in a voice that only Ao Wushuang could hear. "Ao Wushuang, you've retreated. I'm very disappointed." When Ao Wushuang heard this voice, which was particularly old and familiar, she suddenly trembled all over. Her eyes suddenly widened, and she cried out involuntarily, "You arg! Go back and cultivate properly. If you don't become stronger, then you and your precious disciple will really be consigned to eternal damnation." The black-robed man laughed out loud. His figure flashed and instantly disappeared from where he stood. It was as if he had never appeared. Su Chan and Ao Wushuang stood there in a daze, unable to come to their senses for a long time. After a long time, a cold night breeze blew over. Su Chan couldn't help shivering, and then she came to her senses. The little girl looked around in fear, only to see that it was extremely quiet. No matter where she looked, there was no figure of the terrifying man in black. Only the corpse tower was piled up as before, and only the few bloody words on the wall were still staring at them coldly. Vote for recommendation, previous page. Next page, error report if you like. Please click here to add Keeping a Fox at Home to your bookshelf, so that you can read the latest chapters and updates of Keeping a Fox at Home in the future. If you have any suggestions or comments on Keeping a Fox at Home, please click here to express your views. Chapter 529. After a long time, Su Chan walked to Ao Wushuang's side and said in a trembling voice, "Master, who is this person? Why did he massacre Mount Qingqing? And why did he frame Yundong?" Ao Wushuang moved and changed back into her human form. She frowned and pursed her lips tightly. Her eyes were flickering with bewilderment, as if she hadn't heard Su Chan's words. It was not until Su Chan asked her for the third time that Ao Wushuang came to her senses as if she had just woken up from a dream. "Go to the internet." Ao Wushuang's eyes were surprisingly cold. She said to Su Chan, "Chaner, we can't stay here for long. Let's go." Seeing that Ao Wushuang was about to leave, Su Chan immediately grabbed Ao Wushuang's arm and said anxiously, "Master, we can't go. We have to erase these words first." Ao Wushuang turned her head and saw a few sinister and vicious words written on the golden wall. She couldn't help whispering, "It's impossible. Why did he do this?" Hearing Ao Wushuang's words, Su Chan couldn't help asking, "Master, what are you talking about?" Ao Wushuang's face darkened and she said in a cold voice, "Don't ask. Hurry up and erase these words, and we'll go. Be careful not to leave any traces." Like a swallow, she gracefully flew to the front of the golden wall and stretched out her hand to wipe away the bloody words on it. Ao Wushuang immediately appeared beside her, grabbed her arm and scolded, "Are you stupid? Do you want to leave fingerprints and handprints?" Su Chan seemed to wake up from a dream. She immediately picked up a broken sword and shoveled the words on it. Su Chan saw that the bottom line of the two lines was the most dazzling, so she gritted her teeth and began to shovel the words from the bottom. As she shoveled, she gritted her teeth and said, "Evil man, this guy actually gave this to my Yundong. When I become stronger in the future, I won't let you off. After shoveling for a while, Ao Wushuang suddenly appeared in front of her, grabbed the broken sword in her hand, and scolded, "Idiot! Step back and see what's the effect of shoveling." Su Chan took a few steps back in confusion and was suddenly dumbfounded. She saw that she had shoveled the 3 words, but she had shoveled them along the strokes of the 3 words. Moreover, she had also shoveled away the lime powder on the wall, revealing the white wall inside. Therefore, the original 3 blood-red words of Li Yundong had suddenly turned into 3 white words. Moreover, on the golden wall, it was even more conspicuous than the blood-red words next to it. Su Chan let out a cry of surprise and immediately rushed to the wall again. She picked up a broken sword and began to shovel at the wall without any pattern. Finally, she managed to remove all 3 words from the wall. The most important 3 words had been removed by Su Chan. She was about to remove the other words when she heard Ao Wushuang suddenly say nervously, "Oh no, someone is coming. Chaner, let's go." Ao Wushuang grabbed her and ran out without saying anything. Su Chan kept struggling and said loudly, "Master, if these words are not shoveled away, the Fox Zen school will be destroyed. Yundong will also be implicated." Ao Wushuang grabbed her and ran out without saying anything. Su Chan kept struggling and said loudly, "Master, if these words are not shoveled away, the Fox Zen school will be destroyed. Yundong will also be implicated." Ao Wushuang didn't even look back. She pulled Su Chan and ran out without touching the ground. Su Chan turned her head and couldn't help looking back. Suddenly, she saw a flash of cyan light. The Bahuang sword quickly turned into an iron lotus and flashed around the wall a few times. In an instant, the wall collapsed and turned into countless pieces. The Bahuang sword instantly turned into a green light and flashed back to Ao Wushuang's back. Ao Wushuang glared at Su Chan and said, "Are you satisfied now?" Su Chan forced a smile. As she ran, she whispered, "Master, why can't we fly away?" Ao Wushuang sneered and said, "If you want to die, fly away from above. These people must be the reinforcements of the Qingqing sect. If they want to appear, they will definitely fly over from above. If we fly up at this time, we will definitely be discovered by them and regarded as murderers. At that time, we will definitely die." Before she could finish her words, Su Chan suddenly saw more than a dozen incomparably conspicuous beams of green light in the night sky, falling like meteors near the Taoist master cave. As soon as these people landed, they let out a deafening roar. Immediately, more than a dozen people turned into green light and rose into the air, flying in all directions, as if they were searching for the murderers. If Su Chan and Ao Wushuang were to escape from the air at this time, the green light produced by their yin spirits and yang spirits would be clearly seen by people in the air. At this time, they were caught red-handed. Su Chan shivered secretly and couldn't help but say with admiration, "Master, you are amazing. What should we do now?" Ao Wushuang said in a low voice, "Run. Let's get out of the sphere of influence of Qingqing Mountain first." Su Chan nodded, and the 2 of them ran all the way in silence. The 2 of them didn't dare to walk on the mountain road of Dan-Ti Mountain. Instead, they chose remote and dense forests and ran for a long time. It was not until dawn that they ran out of the sphere of influence of Mount Qingqing. At this time, Ao Wushuang raised her head and glanced at them. She sighed softly and relaxed a little. She said, "It's all right." Only then did Su Chan stop. She bent down with one hand on her knee and the other on her chest. She gasped for breath and said, "Master, I don't understand. Why? Who is this person? Why did he frame Yundong? Why did he frame our Fox Zen school? What kind of deep hatred does he have for us?" There was a strange look in Ao Wushuang's eyes. She suddenly snorted, sneered, and said meaningfully, "Chaner, in this world, it's not necessary to have a deep hatred for you to do something to frame you." Su Chan became more and more confused. "Then why? Master, do you know this person?" Ao Wushuang's face changed. She suddenly scolded Su Chan sternly, "Don't ask. Just pretend that you didn't see what happened tonight. Do you hear me?" Su Chan was very anxious. She said loudly, "Master, but..." The blue veins on Ao Wushuang's forehead bulged. She said sternly, "Don't ask. If you really want to help Li Yundong, don't ask. And you can't tell him about this." Su Chan's eyes widened. "Why can't I tell? But before she could finish her words, she saw that Ao Wushuang's eyes were getting fiercer and fiercer. She had rarely seen Ao Wushuang so fierce and stern. The little girl was shocked and swallowed all the words in her stomach. Xueqi had no choice but to lower her head and look back in the direction of Mount Qingqing. Then, full of suspicion, she followed Ao Wushuang and flew away from Mount Qingqing. At this time, in Mount Qingqing, Zhang Huashui was pacing back and forth in front of the Taoist master cave like a furious lion. His hair was standing on end, and his eyes were as wide as copper bells. His eyes were full of blood vessels that were about to burst out of anger, and the blue veins on his forehead were like small snakes, constantly rolling. The dozen or so Taoists around him did not dare to breathe, for fear of angering him and provoking his wrath. Zhang Huashui walked back and forth dozens of times. Suddenly, he stopped and shouted angrily at a middle-aged man of medium height. "Xixiang, haven't you found him yet?" A Taoist priest with a short beard next to him advised. "Xixiang, don't worry. Leader still needs some time." Zhang Huashui suddenly turned his head, as if he was going to eat the man in one bite. He said angrily, Time. It's already dawn." Just as he was roaring, he suddenly saw Zhang Tongtian open his eyes. He glanced sideways at Zhang Huashui and said in a deep voice, "Xixiang, calm down." Zhang Huashui waved his fist, which was as big as a bowl, and roared, "Calm down? How can I calm down? The ancestral court of our Qingqing sect has been massacred. Not only has it been massacred, but they even piled up the corpses of our disciples in front of the Taoist master cave. Such an extraordinary humiliation was simply unheard of and unseen in the past thousands of years. Which crazy bastard did such a heartless thing? If I find out, I will definitely tear him to pieces." After roaring for a while, Zhang Huashui suddenly turned his head and glared at Zhang Tongtian angrily. "Xixiang, have you found any traces?" Zhang Tongtian didn't comment. With a cold face, he turned his head and said to the Taoist next to him, "Go and arrange the corpses first. The dead are the most important. They should be buried in peace." The Taoist asked cautiously, "Leader, do you want to call the police for such a big murder case?" Before Zhang Tongtian could say anything, Zhang Huashui rushed to the Taoist angrily and picked him up like a chicken with one hand. "Call the police? Have you taken the wrong medicine? Do you want the whole cultivation world to laugh at us?" The Taoist's face turned red. He also shouted angrily, "Zhang Huashui, are you crazy? Put me down. In terms of seniority, I'm not lower than you. How can you do this to me? How can you hide such a big thing? Can you hide it?" Zhang Tongtian couldn't help but shout, "Xixiang, put him down." Zhang Huashui turned his head and said angrily to Zhang Tongtian, "Xixiang, am I wrong?" Zhang Tongtian suddenly widened his eyes and said angrily, "Are you the leader or am I?" Zhang Tongtian's appearance was very dignified, and he had a high prestige in the Qingqing sect. When he got angry, everyone was shocked into silence. Even Zhang Huashui didn't say a word. He snorted twice, put down the Taoist in his hand, turned his head, and didn't say a word. Zhang Tongtian looked at the crowd coldly and said, "Now that such a tragedy has happened to our Qingqing sect, it's time for us to be united, help each other, and get through the crisis together. How can we be confused at this time? This happened suddenly, but it can be seen that the other party came prepared, so we were caught off guard. As for the dead Taoist friends, we should compensate them as much as we can. As for calling the police, my opinion is..." Zhang Tongtian dragged out his voice and glanced at the crowd with a dignified look. Everyone also looked at him with different eyes. Zhang Tongtian paused for a moment and said, "I suggest that it's better to solve the problem in the cultivation world Now the situation in the cultivation world is very rare. We can't attract the attention of the country again. Otherwise, if we cause suppression and intervention, the loss will outweigh the gain." Everyone immediately whispered to each other. Zhang Huashui slapped his thigh and said loudly, "Xixiang, you're right." Zhang Tongtian glared at him and said, "Shut up." As a Jinshin master, Zhang Huashui immediately shrank his head after being scolded by his Xixiang. He muttered in a low voice and didn't dare to speak loudly again. A middle-aged Taoist stood up and said, "Leader, are we just going to swallow this matter? If it gets out, what will the other sects think of us?" Zhang Tongtian said coldly, "Did I say that we should just let it go? Humph. I must make the murderer pay for this matter with blood. Immediately, another Taoist asked loudly, Leader, do you know who the murderer is? Zhang Tongtian sneered and said, I'm not sure, but I've already guessed a little. Everyone immediately surrounded him and shouted with righteous indignation, Who is it? Leader, tell us quickly. Zhang Tongtian looked around with a sneer and said, Before the murderer left, he destroyed the scene and even destroyed a wall. He thought he could hide something. But he didn't expect that the net of heaven has long arms. Zhang Huashuai was impatient. He couldn't help but shout, Xixiang, just tell me, who is it? I'll go and kill them right now. Zhang Tongtian snorted and said angrily, Be ****, you have no evidence. Why are you going there? Zhang Huashuai straightened his neck and said, I don't know which son of a ***** it is. Zhang Tongtian sneered and said, Fellow Taoists, don't you feel that the surrounding demon qi is very heavy? The Taoist priests of the Qingqing sect were all stunned. They soon noticed that there was indeed a strange aura around the scene. A sharp-eyed one suddenly pointed to the blood on the ground and said, Look! As he spoke, he picked up a long soft white hair from the pool of blood. The man quickly ran to Zhang Tongtian and handed him the slender white hair, saying, Leader, this seems to be fox fur? Zhang Tongtian twisted the fox fur in his hand. His eyes narrowed into a line and he sneered. Sure enough, the demon qi is soaring to the sky. Zhang Huashuai suddenly flew into a rage. Is it the fox spirits of the Fox Zen school? Are they tired of living? I'll go and kill them. After that, he moved and turned into a beam of blue light in the blink of an eye, soaring into the sky. Previous chapter contents. Next chapter recommendation. Previous page, return to contents. Next page, error report. If you like, please click here to add A Fox Spirit at Home to your bookshelf, so that you can read the latest chapters and updates of A Fox Spirit at Home in the future. If you have any suggestions or comments on A Fox Spirit at Home, please click here to express your views. Chapter 530. As soon as Zhang Huashuai flew into the air, he saw Zhang Tongtian suddenly appear in front of him and stop him. Xueqi, don't be impulsive. Zhang Huashuai said angrily, Don't be impulsive? Xueqi, our Qingqing mountain has suffered such a disaster, and you're telling me not to be impulsive? Zhang Tongtian also said angrily, You rushed to our door without any evidence. What will the other sects think of us? The Fox Zen school lives in the downtown area. What if you alarm the world? Once something big happens, it won't be the Qingqing sect that will suffer, but the entire cultivation world. Zhang Huashui's face turned red, and the blood vessels on his neck bulged. He roared, Are we just going to let the murderer go like this? Zhang Tongtian suppressed his anger and said, There's something evil about this matter. I don't think it's that simple. Don't worry. Wait until I find out. Zhang Huashuai was furious. By the time you find out, the murderer will be at large. Zhang Tongtian pressed his hands on Zhang Huashui's shoulders and said in a deep voice, Xueqi, don't worry. If anyone dares to touch our Qingqing mountain, I will definitely not let them off easily. A blood debt must be paid with blood. However, it's not appropriate to make a big deal out of this now. When we find out, it won't be too late to take revenge. Zhang Huashuai took a deep breath. He forcibly swallowed his anger and said, Okay, sect leader Xixiang, I'll listen to you. Zhang Tongtian said with a cold face, Someone wants to set off a storm in the cultivation world. Humph, well, our Qingqing sect will accompany them to the end. After that, the two Jinshin masters of the Qingqing sect turned into a beam of blue light in the blink of an eye and flew back. WatchNet. New domain name of this website. 8duom. At the same time, just as the Qingqing sect was suffering from a terrible murder, Li Yundong's family received an unexpected invitation. Shan Wankai wants to invite you to a dinner party? Who sent it? Zi Yuan opened the gilded invitation in her hand, glanced at it, and then handed it back to Li Yundong. Li Yundong nodded. Yin Mengfan gave it to Zhou Qin, and Zhou Qin gave it to me. He also invited you. Do you want to go? With that, Li Yundong handed over another invitation. Zi Yuan frowned. She didn't accept the invitation. She shook her head and said, Forget it. I don't like dealing with these businessmen. You can go by yourself. I won't go. Li Yundong smiled and said, "You're not going? How could that do? Why would I go alone?" Zi Yuan smiled and said, "He probably invited you because he wants to be his disciple. Why should I go?" Li Yundong smiled and said, "Apprentice? Those two fellows want to become my disciples? Are you kidding me?" Zi Yuan said, "You can't say that. He doesn't make progress now, but it doesn't mean he won't make progress in the future. Besides, if a cultivation sect wanted to strengthen its influence and strength, the best way was to recruit disciples. It's not enough for you to rely on Xueqi as your disciple. If you accept Shen Wansai's two children as your disciples, at least you won't be so short of money in the future, and you won't have to make a deal with Wang Jinyuan, right?" Li Yundong sighed and shook his head. "Is there no way to cultivate without spending money? Why is it that when it comes to cultivation, it's all about money?" Zi Yuan laughed and said, "When Zhang Daoling, the founder of Zhengyi School, founded the 5 Pecks of Rice sect, he still had to earn teaching fees, let alone now. If you think that these two fellows are useless, then just accept one of them." Li Yundong said with a serious face, "I can't be careless about accepting disciples. Once I open a gap, it will be difficult to close the gap later. I have my own plans for this matter." Zi Yuan nodded and said, "It's good that you have a plan. Are you going to the dinner tonight?" Li Yundong thought for a moment and said, "Yes, for the sake of the Buddha. Even for the sake of Xueqi, I have to go." Zi Yuan smiled and looked at Xueqi's room. "How is she now? Is her injury better?" Li Yundong nodded and said, "She wanted to go with me, but she is now practicing the heavenly Jindan technique and is changing her bones and blood, so she can't go." Zi Yuan smiled and said, "Then you can find another companion. I don't want to go." Seeing that Zi Yuan insisted on not going, Li Yundong didn't force her. He smiled bitterly and said, "Well, I'll ask Chon'er to go with me. However, I don't know where this girl has gone. She hasn't come back yet." While they were talking, they saw 2 figures flash on Yangtai Mountain. It was Ao Wushuang and Su Chan who had returned to Tiannan City from Mount Qingqing. When Li Yundong saw Su Chan and Ao Wushuang, he smiled and said, "You two haven't seen each other all night. Where have you been?" Su Chan was still in a state of shock. Although Ao Wushuang had carefully helped her tidy up her clothes before they came back, her little heart was beating uncontrollably. Hearing Li Yundong greet her, Su Chan opened her mouth. She subconsciously wanted to tell Li Yundong about the horrible thing she had found that night, but she heard Ao Wushuang cough intentionally or unintentionally. The little girl immediately swallowed the words that were about to come out of her mouth. Su Chan took a deep breath and forced a smile. "No, I didn't go anywhere." Seeing Su Chan's stiff expression, Li Yundong couldn't help but be stunned. He asked curiously, "What's wrong with you?" Su Chan looked at Li Yundong, tongue-tied and speechless. Although she was cunning and sharp-tongued, it was really a little difficult for her to lie through her teeth in the face of the sudden big change and her deep love for Li Yundong. What made Su Chan the most painful was that she didn't understand why her master didn't let her tell Li Yundong these things. This mysterious man in black wanted to frame the Fox Zen School. As the leader of the Fox Zen School, shouldn't Li Yundong know? But Su Chan also knew that her master must have her reasons for asking her to do this. But when she asked her master, she refused to say anything. It was really worrying. Su Chan forced a smile, which was uglier than crying. She had no choice but to turn her head to look at Ao Wushuang. Ao Wushuang's expression was as usual. She chuckled and said, "I'm sorry to make you worry. I'll take Su Chan out to practice." Li Yundong didn't doubt her and said with a smile, "I guess so." Su Chan was afraid that Li Yundong would ask her questions, so she said in a panic, "Yundong, I'll go back to sleep first." Li Yundong saw that the little girl was running to her room as if she was running for her life. He quickly stopped her and said, "Hey, Xueqi is practicing inside. You can go to my room. But you won't sleep for long. We have to go out to the dinner party later." Su Chan suddenly stopped, turned her face, and looked at Li Yundong pitifully. "Where are you going? Can I not go?" Li Yundong put on a straight face and pretended to be angry. "No. Zi Yuan won't go, and Xueqi can't go. Only you can go with me. What's wrong with you?" Su Chan rolled her eyes. She thought for a moment, then covered her stomach and said, I have a stomachache." Li Yundong's eyes widened. It didn't hurt just now, but now it hurts? Su-chan quickly put on a bitter face and cried. It just suddenly hurt. Seeing Su-chan's pained expression, Li Yundong's heart skipped a beat. He thought that the little girl really had a stomachache, so he couldn't help asking, what's going on? Why do you have a stomachache all of a sudden? Su-chan's mind was in a mess, and she said incoherently, isn't it normal to have a stomachache? Li Yundong was stunned and asked subconsciously, is your period coming? Su-chan nodded subconsciously. That's right. My period is coming. My stomach hurts like hell. That's right, Li Yundong said. As soon as she said this, Zi Yuan snorted and immediately turned her head, her shoulders shaking uncontrollably. Li Yundong couldn't help laughing out loud. Come on, you're already in the Xueqi phase. You have a leakless body. Where did your period come from? Su-chan was dumbfounded. She stared blankly at him. Only then did she realize that for those who had reached the Xueqi phase, men would no longer have the physiological phenomenon of semen loss, and women would no longer have menstruation every month. Because of this, cultivators after the Xueqi phase all had leakless bodies, which could perfectly protect their essence, qi, and blood from leaking to the outside. Su-chan complained in her heart. How could I have forgotten this? The little girl smiled dryly and said, well, maybe there are exceptions to everything. Li Yundong glared at Su-chan and said, what nonsense are you talking about? Go take a rest and tidy yourself up. Come with me later. Su-chan had no choice but to reply with a puff of her cheeks. Oh. Li Yundong watched her enter his room, then turned his head helplessly and said to Ao Wushuang with a smile, I don't know where this guy has been all night. But as he spoke, he saw that Ao Wushuang had lowered her head and her eyes were flashing, as if she was thinking about something. She turned a deaf ear to him. Li Yundong was stunned and couldn't help raising his voice a little. Senior Ao Wushuang? Only then did Ao Wushuang wake up as if she had just woken up from a dream. She suddenly raised her head and said, ah? I took Chonner out to practice martial arts tonight. Leader, you don't have to worry. After that, she forced a smile at Li Yundong and rushed into her room like a gust of wind. Li Yundong looked at Zi Yuan in confusion and asked, what's going on between the two of them? Zi Yuan looked at Ao Wushuang doubtfully. Suddenly, her nose twitched and she frowned slightly. She whispered, do you smell anything? Li Yundong also sniffed and shook his head. No, what's the smell? Zi Yuan thought for a while and said, it seems to be the smell of blood, but it's very faint. Li Yundong couldn't help laughing and said, could it be that Chonner's cultivation has really regressed and her period has come? Zi Yuan couldn't help laughing and said angrily, nonsense. How can you talk about this kind of thing? The two of them were talking and laughing outside the door. Although their voices were clearly transmitted into the room, Su-chan didn't hear them at all. She kept pacing back and forth in Li Yundong's room like an ant on a hot pan. What should I do? What should I do? Su-chan bit her lip and kept slapping the palm of her left hand with the back of her right hand. Such a big thing has happened. Why doesn't Master want me to tell Yundong? I'm so worried. Why does this person want to frame our Fox Zen school? What kind of blood feud do we have with him? If others find out that it was our Fox Zen school who did this, it will be a disaster. No matter how powerful Yundong is, he can't bear such a terrible disaster. Su-chan was lost in thought. Her snow-white teeth bit her plump red lips, leaving 2 deep teeth marks. Blood seeped out unconsciously, but she didn't notice it at all. Su-chan only felt as if she had bumped into a dark fog, surrounded by murderous intent, but she didn't know where the danger was. Moreover, she couldn't shout or make a sound. She couldn't warn Li Yundong of such a terrible danger. There were thousands of thoughts in her mind, but after thinking about it, she finally focused on a few questions. Who is this person? Why did he want to massacre Mount Qingqing? And why did he want to frame the Fox Zen school? The little girl was puzzled. Thinking of the annoyance, she couldn't help stamping her feet and whispering, just because we are from the Fox Zen school and we are fox spirits, can all the dirty water in the world be poured on us? Su-chan thought for a moment and suddenly made a decision. No, I still have to tell Yundong. Forget it. As soon as she made up her mind, she suddenly heard a knock on the door. Li Yundong shouted from outside. Chonner, have you had a good rest? Let's go out. It's going to be dark. Su-chan turned her head and saw that it was getting dark outside. She had been frowning in the room for a long time, but she hadn't noticed it at all. As soon as Lee Yundong's voice fell, he pushed the door open and came in. He was wearing a dark red tang suit with gold embroidery, standing at the door with an imposing appearance. At first glance, he saw Su-chan standing in the room in a daze, looking at him blankly, as if she wanted to say something. He couldn't help but ask curiously, "Didn't you rest? Why didn't you change your clothes? Didn't I tell you that I was going out?" "Forget it," Lee Yundong said with a smile. "Just leave it at that. You're a natural beauty anyway. Even if you don't dress up, you're still a pretty girl. Come on, let's go. Their car is waiting outside." Su-chan was just about to say something when she heard Lee Yundong's words. Su-chan's words were on the tip of her tongue, but for some reason, she suddenly thought of Ao Wushuang's stern warning and swallowed her words. The little girl forced a smile and said, "Then let's go." Lee Yundong praised the little girl. Normally, Su-chan would be beaming with joy and act coquettishly with him, but today she was very quiet. She walked as if she was holding her heart in her hands. Lee Yundong clicked his tongue and said, "Have you changed your personality today? Do you want to change your profession and become a lady?" Su-chan lowered her head, full of worries, and went out the door. Lee Yundong's heart was full of questions, but he didn't think too much about it. He walked over with a smile, gently held the little girl in his arms, and went out with her to get in the car. After Su-chan got into the car, she didn't dare to look at Lee Yundong, for fear that if she looked at him one more time, he would discover something. Along the way, she just turned her head and looked out of the window. At this time, it was winter. Although Tiannan City was a southern city, it was already a little dark at this time. The streetlights had already been lit up, and the city was a bustling and bright scene. Through the car window, Su-chan looked at the bustling night view outside, which was like a parade of lanterns, but in her mind, the horrible Jingguan Corpse Tower of Mount Qingqing was replaying. She looked blankly at the passers-by outside the window and the brightly lit high-rise buildings around her. The girl suddenly shivered for no reason, as if there was a terrible, ferocious and murderous aura in this familiar world. No one knew what was going to happen, and no one knew what terrible storms were going to happen. Everything was calm as usual, as if a storm was coming. 8. Do Baidu search. Chapter 531. The two of them sat in the car that Chen Wankai had specially sent to pick them up. After about 30 minutes of driving, they finally entered a high-class residential area that was heavily guarded. They passed through an artificial lake and a garden, and finally stopped in front of a two-story villa. Lee Yundong and Su-chan sat in a car that Chen Wankai had sent to pick them up. Go to see. Before entering the villa, Lee Yundong saw several luxury cars parked in front of the villa. The men who got out of the cars were dressed in suits and leather shoes, and the women were gorgeously dressed. Lee Yundong pulled Su-chan out of the car. Only then did Su-chan realize that she was wearing a very ordinary long dress, and she hadn't even combed her hair. She panicked and said, "Ah, I haven't taken care of myself yet. Why did you bring me to such a place?" Lee Yundong didn't know whether to laugh or cry. He pinched Su-chan's nose and said with a smile, "You silly girl, you didn't take care of yourself for so long at home, and you didn't say anything when you went out. Now you regret it? What are you thinking about? Why are you so distracted today?" Su-chan lowered her head and was tongue-tied. "Nothing." Lee Yundong saw that Su-chan was full of worries, and his heart moved. He raised her chin with his hand and asked, "Chaner, what's wrong with you? You're not right today." Su-chan raised her head and looked at Lee Yundong eagerly. She wanted to say something but stopped. Finally, she shook her head firmly. Seeing that Su-chan was unwilling to say anything, Lee Yundong smiled and said, "What trouble did you get into again? It's okay, I won't be angry." Su-chan quickly waved her hand and said, No. She's very obedient. She didn't get into trouble, and she won't get into trouble in the future." "But?" Lee Yundong asked, "But what?" Su-chan thought for a moment with a troubled look and said, "What if someone wants to frame you?" Lee Yundong was stunned, and then he couldn't help laughing. "Frame me? Ha ha ha, I'm not afraid of the shadow. What's there to frame?" Su-chan said anxiously, "No, it's..." She wanted to say more, but Lee Yundong said to her with a smile, "Forget it. We'll talk about it when we get back." Don't you see that people around us are looking at us? Xueqi looked around and saw that many people were looking at them with different expressions. Xueqi couldn't help but snuggle up to him and whisper, "Are they laughing at me for not dressing well?" Li Yundong knew that Xueqi had once been chased out by young Master He because of her clothes, so she paid special attention to this when she attended the banquet. Li Yundong patted the girl's head affectionately. "Silly girl, they're just jealous of your beauty." Xueqi's heart warmed, and she gave him a sweet smile. The two of them walked through the garden path in front of the villa. When they came to the door, they saw a middle-aged man in a tuxedo standing at the door. The middle-aged man stood upright, and in his chest pocket was a folded napkin. There was a golden brooch on the napkin, making him look noble and reserved. When the middle-aged man saw Li Yundong and Xueqi, he was slightly stunned, as if he was surprised by the temperament of the two of them. But he quickly smiled and greeted them. "Hello, please show me your invitation." Li Yundong handed over the invitation with a smile. The middle-aged man opened it and glanced at it. He said with a bright smile, "It's Child Li. Please." Li Yundong nodded at him with a smile and walked inside with Xueqi in his arms. The two of them entered the hall and saw a very spacious living room. In the middle of the living room was a long table full of all kinds of delicious food. The silver tableware and copper candlesticks on the long table and the luxurious golden ceiling decoration on the roof reflected each other. There were about 40 to 50 luxuriously dressed men and women standing around the hall. Among them, there were waiters carrying wine trays coming and going. Although Li Yundong had been to a high-end hotel, he was still surprised by the luxurious scene of Chen Wansai's home. Xueqi couldn't help but open her mouth wide and whisper, "What is he doing? Why is he holding this banquet?" Li Yundong whispered, "His youngest daughter, Xueqi, is celebrating her birthday." Xueqi asked in surprise, "Xueqi? Is it the little girl who wanted to worship you as her master on the opening day of our Desanxian?" Li Yundong laughed and said, "Let me correct you a few questions. First, it's not that Xueqi wants to worship me as her master. It's Xueqi's father, Chen Wankai, who wants her to worship me. She hates me. Second, she's not a little girl. She just looks young." Xueqi asked indifferently, "Do you want to accept her as your disciple?" Li Yundong shook his head and said, "The disciple I want to accept must be devoted to the Tao. A forcibly picked melon is not sweet. A person like her is not suitable for cultivation." Xueqi blinked her eyes and said, "But you can accept her as a registered disciple, not to cultivate her into a great cultivator. You have to know that even Zhang Daoling, the founder of Taoism in the Chinese cultivation world, had many disciples who were only responsible for supporting him and did not receive his true teachings. Moreover, in modern times, Premier Zhou once worshipped Han Muxia as his master, but he didn't become a Xingyi master." Li Yundong knew that Han Muxia was a martial arts master who was as famous as Hua Yuanjia in the Republic of China. She was the former chief martial arts instructor of the Huangpu Military Academy. At that time, she had even taught the famous saber team. Li Yundong said with a smile, "You little girl, you want me to accept her. What are you up to?" Xueqi asked in confusion, "But it's better to use your own disciples' money than other people's money, isn't it? As the saying goes, when you eat from others, your mouth is short and your hands are soft. Isn't that so?" Li Yundong was stunned. "Did you hear what I said to Wang Zhenyuan?" Xueqi lowered her head in embarrassment and whispered, "You were talking so loudly. It's hard not to hear." Li Yundong smiled and said, "It doesn't matter. There's nothing to hide. However, you're right. The reason why I didn't agree to Wang Zhenyuan's request was because his conditions were too generous. I don't want to owe him anything. On the surface, this person seems to be magnanimous and broad-minded, but in fact, he is scheming and ambitious. It's a pity that today's world is not in chaos, so if he wants to succeed, he must first disrupt the overall situation. But once he does that, he will definitely get into trouble. So, I don't want to have too much to do with him." Disrupt the overall situation? As Xueqi listened to Li Yundong's words, an idea suddenly flashed through her mind. It was as if a bolt of lightning had suddenly struck down from the dark fog, illuminating the dark world and allowing her to see her surroundings clearly. However, the lightning was too fast and disappeared in a flash. Although Xueqi felt as if she had understood something, she soon found that her surroundings had fallen into darkness again, as if she had understood nothing. The little girl opened her mouth and stood there in a daze, her eyes flashing. Li Yundong looked at her and couldn't help but ask curiously, "What are you thinking about?" Before Xueqi could speak, she saw a person suddenly walking over from the side, and a strong smell of perfume assailed her nostrils. "Oh, who is this? You look so familiar." A voice full of sarcasm and mockery rang out beside Li Yundong, and Li Yundong turned his head and immediately laughed in his heart. He saw a woman in her 30s standing in front of him. This woman was wearing a luxurious fur coat and was covered with jewels. She was extremely beautiful. She was Mrs. Li, the fourth concubine of Shen Kai, whom he had met in the Long Men building. The fourth concubine hadn't heard that Shen Kai had invited Li Yundong before, so she was surprised and excited to see Li Yundong at the banquet at her home. She thought to herself that she finally had a chance to humiliate this young man who had once taken advantage of her. The fourth concubine thought proudly in her heart, "Humph, I'll let him know who has the most weight in the Shen family, in case he doesn't know the immensity of heaven and earth." Li Yundong turned around and pretended to be respectful. "Ah, it turns out to be Mrs. Li. Hello, I'm sorry." When the fourth concubine saw that Li Yundong had taken the initiative to address her as Mrs. Li, she was so angry that her nose almost became crooked. She couldn't help raising her eyebrows and saying sarcastically, "I don't know what housekeeper Zhang is doing. Why did he let all kinds of people in?" "Humph, although our Shen is broad-minded, he can't tolerate everyone. What are you doing here?" Xueqi was very unhappy when she heard this. She was about to speak, but she saw Li Yundong put a hand on her shoulder, signaling her not to speak. Xueqi snorted and turned her face away angrily. Li Yundong was not angry. He chuckled and said, "Mrs. Li, I'm really sorry. It was Shen Kai who invited us here." The fourth concubine's face stiffened. "Why did he invite you?" Li Yundong smiled and said, "Then you should ask Shen Kai, Mrs. Li." The fourth concubine flew into a rage out of humiliation. "How dare you call our Shen by his name?" Li Yundong chuckled and said, "Why not? Isn't a name just a symbol? You can call it, I can call it, and everyone can call it. Is it because you have a little money that your name becomes noble?" The fourth concubine was extremely angry. She glared at Li Yundong fiercely, gritted her teeth and said, "You sharp-tongued boy, I'll remember you." After that, she turned around and left with hatred. Xueqi looked at her figure and looked at Li Yundong helplessly. She asked, "Yundong, why do people come to make trouble for us wherever we go?" Li Yundong thought for a moment, patted the little girl's head, and said, "Maybe it's because the tree is taller than the forest?" After that he also chuckled. The fourth concubine of the Shen family had hit a nail on the head with Li Yundong, but her angry look was seen by a handsome young man. He walked over with a smile and asked, "Aunt Shen, what's the matter? Why are you so angry?" The fourth concubine turned her head and saw the young man at first glance. The anger on her face immediately dissipated a little. She forced a smile and said, "So it's Mr. Rong." Young Master Rong saw that after saying that to him, she was still looking at another person angrily. He followed her gaze and looked in the direction of Li Yundong. He asked curiously, "Who is this?" But when he saw Xueqi beside Li Yundong, he was even more shocked. His eyes widened, and he was tongue-tied. He almost drooled. How could there be such an enchanting woman in the world? The fourth concubine sneered and said, "Humph, he's just an uneducated young man." Mr. Rong rolled his eyes and smiled. "Aunt Shin, do you want me to teach him a lesson for you?" The fourth concubine was delighted, but she frowned. She pretended to hesitate and said, "That's not good, is it?" Mr. Rong laughed. He was about to speak again when he suddenly saw a group of young people surrounding a gorgeously dressed girl coming down from upstairs. When he saw the girl who was surrounded by all the stars, his face immediately lit up. He smiled and said to the fourth concubine, "Ah, Aunt Shen, shall we is out. I'll go and say a few words to her. I'll help you teach the guy who offended you a lesson later." The fourth concubine smiled at him. After he turned his face away, she immediately pulled a long face and looked at Shen Hui with hatred. She gritted her teeth and said in a low voice, "Little fox, what are you so proud of? No matter how beautiful and capable you are, the family business will not be passed on to you." At this time, most of the people gathered around Shen Hui were young and beautiful girls. When they saw Mr. Rong coming, Their eyes lit up and they said in surprise, "Hey, it's Rong Junyi. He's here too? Wow, Xueqi, you have a lot of face. You can even invite him." Although this banquet was held for Xueqi, she looked a little listless. She was wearing a snow-white long dress. The hem of the long dress was fluffy like an umbrella, and her waist was tightly tied with a belt, which outlined the curve of her slender waist. In front of her chest was a bright ruby necklace, which was dazzling. On her head was a small platinum crown with diamonds, like a noble princess coming out of a Western oil painting. Xueqi pretended to be a lady with flagging interest. She glanced at Rong Jun, who was walking toward her, curled the corner of her mouth and said, "It's not that I have a lot of face, but that my father has a lot of face." These girls didn't take it seriously and said with a smile, "What's the difference?" "Hey, Xueqi, I heard that he's been chasing you very fiercely recently?" Xueqi sighed and said, "Yes, he's like a fly. He's so annoying." The girls sighed and said, "Come on, Rong Jun is tall, handsome, a top student at Harvard University, and the eldest son of Rong Guofa of a large consortium. What else do you want?" Xueqi sneered and said, "If you're interested, I'll give him to you." The girls laughed one after another. "That's good. I'm afraid that you'll go back on your word." Xueqi smiled and was about to speak, but when she looked around the crowd, she suddenly saw Li Yundong. She was shocked and said in surprise, "Oh my God, why is he here? Is the old man sick? Why did he invite him?" The girls saw that Xueqi looked as if she had seen a ghost. Her face was full of fear, and she didn't look like a dignified lady at all. They all looked at Li Yundong curiously. At this time, Rong Jun had already walked up to Xueqi. He said with a smile, "Shall we? You are very beautiful today." However, Xueqi didn't seem to hear him. She just said in a panic, "It's over. The old man will definitely mention the apprenticeship again today. I hate him. I don't want to be his apprentice." Rong Jun looked at Li Yundong strangely. He frowned secretly and asked, "What's wrong with him?" Xueqi suddenly had an idea and thought of a good way to divert the trouble. She grabbed Rong Jun, pretended to be pitiful, and said, "Rong Jun, can you do me a favor?" Rong Jun was stunned. He had rarely seen Xueqi so affectionate to him, let alone ask him for help. He asked, "What's the matter?" Xueqi pointed at Li Yundong and whispered, "Help me drive him away, okay?" Xueqi was originally extremely beautiful, and her appearance was no less than that of Su-chan. Today, she was dressed so gorgeously that even an Iron Man would be soft-hearted when he saw her. Not to mention that Rong Jun had been desperately pursuing Xueqi. Now that the beauty had a request, how could he not agree? In addition, the fourth concubine of the Shen family also hated this person very much. If he stood up for her, he could please two important people of the Shen family at the same time. He would be a fool not to do such a cost-effective thing. Rong Jun was overjoyed for a moment. Without thinking about it, he patted his chest and said, "Well, I'll help you teach him a lesson. Let him get out of here." This was yesterday's updates. Today's update is still the same. Chapter 532. When Xueqi saw Rong Jun volunteering, she was delighted, but her face was full of embarrassment. She said, "Don't go too far. After all, he is also a guest invited by the old master. Go to the internet." 7K. OM. Rong Jun smiled slightly and said, "Don't worry, I will make him retreat." Seeing him turn around and leave, Xueqi looked at Li Yundong with a smile, her eyes full of schadenfreude. The female companions around her asked curiously, "Hui, who is this? He's so handsome. Why didn't you introduce such a handsome guy to us? Why did you drive him away?" Xueqi rolled her eyes at them angrily and said, "Idiot, that's the tutor my father wants to give me. Humph, if I don't drive him away, will I let him stay so that I can suffer in the future?" Most of Xueqi's female companions were her classmates. Most of them were young girls, who were at the age of infatuation. Some girls couldn't help but say with their eyes shining, Hui, if you don't want such a handsome tutor, don't waste him. Give him to me." "Yeah, I've never seen such a handsome tutor before." Xueqi tilted her head and looked at Li Yundong, only to see that although Li Yundong was wearing a tang suit and a pair of cloth shoes on his feet, he looked out of place with his surroundings. However, if this outfit was worn by others, it would look nondescript. But when it was worn by Li Yundong, it revealed a strong sense of classical elegance. Especially when Li Yundong stood among the crowd, his posture was like a pine tree and his appearance was dignified. No matter how much she hated this guy, she had to admit that he was indeed a man who could attract girls. Xueqi snorted, curled her lips and said, "What tutor? He wants me to worship him as a teacher, the kind of worship in ancient times." As she said this, she couldn't help but sigh and press her forehead with her hand. I don't know what the old master is thinking. Why is he still doing this in this day and age? Worship him as a teacher? The girls asked in unison, and one by one, they asked excitedly, "It seems to be fun. What do you want to learn from him?" "I don't know what to learn," Xueqi said with a crazy face. "Can you not be infatuated with a handsome man? There are so many handsome guys in this world. Aren't you afraid that you'll become a fool one day?" The girls laughed. "Don't be afraid. I'm just afraid that there aren't enough handsome guys." The girls laughed in unison, and the sound immediately attracted the attention of the men in the hall. Li Yundong also looked at them strangely, only to find that a young British boy was walking toward him. The boy was about 1.8 meters tall and was wearing famous brand clothes. He was handsome, and although he had a smile on his face, between his eyebrows, there was a condescending air of a noble family. Rongjun walked up to Li Yundong. He first looked at Suchan with amazement and greed, then smiled at Li Yundong and said, "Hello, may I know your name?" Although Li Yundong didn't know why Rongjun was here, he still nodded politely and said, "My surname is Li." Rongjun nodded. Although he wanted to make trouble for Li Yundong, he had some scruples in his heart. He asked, "Hello, Mr. Li. Where do you work?" Li Yundong thought for a moment, then turned to Suchan and said with a smile, "What do I do?" Suchan was also stunned by this question. She blinked her eyes, thought for a moment, and thought to herself, "I can't say that I'm the leader of the Fox Zen school, can I? I can't say that I'm a cultivator, can I?" The girl said tentatively in a low voice, "The owner of a tea house?" Li Yundong couldn't help laughing. He winked at Suchan and whispered, "That's too tacky." After that, Li Yundong turned his head and said to Rongjun with a smile, "I'm unemployed." Suchan burst into laughter, pinched Li Yundong's arm and whispered, "You're even more tacky than the owner of a tea house." Although Rongjun didn't hear what they were talking about, he felt a little sour in his heart when he saw Li Yundong and Suchan talking so intimately. He smiled and asked, "Unemployed? Mr. Li, you like to joke too much." Li Yundong said seriously, "I'm not joking. I used to go to school, but now I don't. I opened a tea house, but it was almost closed down." Rongjun laughed. Seeing that Li Yundong was serious and didn't seem to be joking, the caution in his heart gradually disappeared. He said with a smile, "Well, Mr. Li, do you know where this is?" Li Yundong smiled and said, "It seems to be the Shin family's mansion." Rongjun nodded and said, "Then can I trouble you to do me a favor?" Li Yundong asked, "What kind of help do you need from a young master like you?" Rongjun smiled and took out a stack of money from his wallet. He pointed to the door and said, "Can you help me buy something?" Li Yundong was stunned. "Buy something? What do you want to buy?" Rongjun nodded and said with a smile, "As long as you are willing to help, these are all yours. Moreover, Old Master Shin likes to eat the freshest Westlake lotus seeds. Can you buy some for me?" Suchan suddenly asked in surprise, "Westlake lotus seeds? That's in Hangzhou, which is very far away. Moreover, in this season, where can we get fresh lotus seeds?" Rongjun smiled at Suchan, then looked at Li Yundong seriously and said reservedly, "Please." Only then did Li Yundong understand that Rongjun was driving him away in a roundabout way. Where could he buy fresh lotus seeds in this late winter? Even if he could buy fresh lotus seeds from Westlake, it would be too late to travel from Dongwu City to Hangzhou, not to mention whether the banquet was over or not. Li Yundong had almost lost his temper after cultivating in the spirit space, but his nature had not changed. If others wanted to be polite to him, he would be more polite than anyone else, but if someone made trouble with him, his problem would be bigger than anyone else. Li Yundong was not angry. He smiled and said to Rongjun, "Yes, but I know that Shen Wankai likes to eat something else." Rongjun saw that Li Yunyang was serious. He frowned secretly and asked, "What is it?" Li Yundong said with a serious face, "It's a good thing. Old Master Shen must have dreamed of eating it. It's said that after eating it, he can regain his youth and even live forever." Rong Jun looked at Li Yundong with a strange expression. He vaguely felt that Li Yundong was playing with him, but he saw that Li Yundong was serious and didn't seem to be joking, so he asked, "What is it?" Li Yundong said with a smile, "Dragon liver and phoenix gall." Rong Jun's face suddenly changed. Just as he was about to get angry, he saw Li Yundong reach into his pocket and take out a 1 yuan coin. He said with a smile, "Can you help me buy dragon liver and phoenix gall, and I'll help you buy Westlake lotus seeds?" Rong Jun wanted to get angry, but after hearing Li Yundong's words, his heart skipped a beat and he forcibly suppressed his anger. He said with a smile, "I'll help you buy dragon liver and phoenix gall, and you'll help me buy Westlake lotus seeds?" Okay. Li Yundong was overjoyed. He took the banknote from his hand without hesitation and then handed over the coin in his hand. "Here, this is the money to buy dragon liver and phoenix gall." Rong Jun saw that Li Yundong looked like a beggar giving alms. He sneered in his heart and said with an unnatural expression on his face, "Forget it. Do you think I lack this little money?" Li Yundong smiled and said, "Then I won't stand on ceremony. No matter how little mosquito meat is, it's still meat." As he said this, he unceremoniously put the coin in his hand back into his pocket, then pretended to be careless and put a stack of red banknotes into Su Chan's hand, saying, "Girl, I'm rich today. How much money do you have?" Su Chan and Li Yundong had been together for the longest time, so she knew very well that her master loved to tease people. Even though he had become a great cultivator, he still hadn't changed this habit. At this time, she also put aside the troubles in her heart, took the money with a smile, and began to count it with a smile. Li Yundong smiled and watched Su Chan count the money. After watching for a while, he found that Rong Jun had been standing beside him and looking at him with unkind eyes. He asked curiously, "Hey, why are you still here? Aren't you going to buy dragon livers and phoenix gall?" Rong Jun snorted and said with a sneer, "Let's wait until there are dragons and phoenixes in this world. But aren't you going to buy the lotus seeds of Westlake? Why haven't you gone yet?" Li Yundong tried hard to hold back his laughter and said seriously, "I did agree to go, but I might go in 10 minutes or in 10 years. Su Chan, who was standing to one side, burst out laughing. She suddenly remembered the scene of Li Yundong teasing Lu Dekaisi before, and for a moment, she burst into laughter. Rong Jun was immediately embarrassed into anger. Finally, he couldn't help but lose his temper and say, "Are you kidding me?" However, Li Yundong looked at Rong Jun with a strange expression. "It's strange. How did I trick you? I just promised to buy it for you, but I didn't say when I would buy it for you." Rong Jun took a deep breath and said angrily, "Do you know who I am? How dare you trick me?" Li Yundong asked with a smile, "I haven't asked for your name yet." Rong Jun subconsciously wanted to say his name and identity, but he felt that it would be too rude. He swallowed hard and said angrily, "You don't even know me. How dare you come to this kind of banquet?" Li Yundong asked curiously, "Your surname is Shen?" Rong Jun said angrily, "My surname is Rong." Li Yundong said with a smile, "This banquet is held for Shen Hui's birthday. You are not a member of the Shen family. Why should I know you? Moreover, even if you are from the Shen family, why should I know someone from the Shen family?" Su Chan, who was standing to one side, also made a face at Rong Jun and said, "Let's go. You're so annoying. We don't welcome you." Rong Jun was furious. Just as he was about to speak, he saw the fourth concubine of the Shen family suddenly walk over and say with a sneer, "It should be us who don't welcome you. It seems that in this family, I can still say a few words and make the decision, right?" The fourth concubine had been eavesdropping on the conversation between the three of them. At this time, she finally caught a topic and interrupted. Seeing that the most favored fourth concubine of the Shen family had spoken, Rong Jun couldn't help but be overjoyed. He said with a smile, "Aunt Shen, it's great that you came." He pointed at Li Yundong and said, "Why did Uncle Shen invite such a person to the banquet? It's too rude and uncultured." The fourth concubine snorted and said in a strange tone, "Maybe Steward Zhang's eyes are dazzled and he let in some shady people. Humph. Zhang Xiaoquan. Zhang Xiaoquan." The fourth concubine's voice was sharp. Her shout immediately attracted everyone in the hall to look at her. Zhang Xiaoquan, the steward who was welcoming the guests at the door, immediately came over and said respectfully, "Aunt, are you calling me?" The fourth concubine's face was full of sarcasm. She pointed at Li Yundong and said, "You're old and your eyes are not good. How can you let people in?" Steward Zhang glanced at Li Yundong and said hesitantly, "That's right. He's holding an invitation letter written by the old man himself." The fourth concubine raised her eyebrows and said, "Can't he falsely claim it?" Steward Zhang was stunned. He knew that it would be difficult to settle this matter today. The fourth concubine was used to running amok at home because she was a mother and her son. If he didn't follow her wishes, he was afraid that he would have a hard time in the future. Steward Zhang turned his face and said helplessly to Li Yundong and Su Chan, "I'm really sorry. Maybe I was wrong. You two, look." Although Li Yundong was in the eye of the public and was in the eye of the storm, his expression did not change at all. He still looked at Steward Zhang with a smile, as if he was just an ordinary passerby watching the fun. With a calm expression, he said to Su Chan with a smile, "Forget it. Someone doesn't welcome us. Let's go first. Anyway, Zhou Qin has been given face." Su Chan also nodded hard and made a face at the fourth concubine. She snorted and said, "You're a snob." The fourth concubine looked at the backs of Li Yundong and Su Chan as they left and felt that there was no place for her to vent her anger. She immediately turned her head and shouted at Steward Zhang, "Open your eyes wider in the future. Don't let such shady people in again." Shen Hui, who was upstairs, saw that Li Yundong and Su Chan had finally left. She gloated and danced with joy, laughing and saying, "Great, they're gone, they're really gone. Shall we, who left?" As soon as she finished speaking, she saw an old man walking out with a smile. It was Shen Wan Kai. I was delayed by something today. I'm sorry, but it's very late. Don't wait. Chapter 533. Shen Hui suddenly saw Shen Wan Kai at a glance, and her heart suddenly skipped a beat. She cussed in her heart. She rolled her eyes quickly and said with a smile, "It's nothing, Mr. Shen. Did you hear wrong?" Shen Wan Kai had started from scratch and had been scheming against others all his life. He was best at observing people's words and expressions. He glanced at Shen Hui, snorted, and said, "You're rolling your eyes so fast. What kind of guilty thing are you doing? Hurry up and make it clear. Who left? Why are you so happy?" Shen Hui forced a smile and said, "It's really nothing." As she said this, she turned around and winked at her companions. "Don't you think so?" The girls laughed dryly and said, "Yes, it's really nothing. Go to the internet." How could Shen Wan Kai believe it? He glanced at the little girls and calmly glanced at the field. Suddenly, his heart skipped a beat. He narrowed his eyes slightly and looked at Shen Hui with an unfriendly gaze. Li Yundong was here just now? Shen Hui opened her mouth and subconsciously wanted to refute, but when she saw Shen Wan Kai's sharp, eagle-like eyes, her heart suddenly trembled. The lie was on the tip of her tongue, but she couldn't say it. She forced a smile and had to tell the truth. He was here just now, but he left again. Shen Wan Kai narrowed his eyes again, and his gaze became sharper and sharper. The banquet hasn't started yet. Why did he leave? Shen Hui looked at the sky and said insincerely, "Who knows? This person has a strange temperament. Don't you know that, Mr. Shen?" Shen Wan Kai snorted. "He has a strange temperament? Young Master Li is the most talented person I've ever met in my life. He is calm and magnanimous. I think you are the one with a strange temperament, aren't you?" As he said this, he paused and said meaningfully, "You drove him away again, didn't you?" Shen Hui was stunned. "Again? What do you mean again? I didn't drive him away. He left on his own." Shen Wan Kai's anger gradually rose in his heart. He glanced at the girls around Shen Hui and said in a deep voice, "You guys go away." These girls looked at each other, forced a smile and said hello to Shen Hui, and then flew to the other side. Shen Wan Kai took a deep breath and walked up to Shen Hui. He lowered his voice and said, "Today is your birthday. I don't want to be angry. I'll give you a chance. Hurry up and get him back. I'll pretend that nothing happened. Otherwise..." Shen Hui bit the bullet and said, "It's really not me. If you don't believe me, You can ask everyone here. You're still being stubborn? Chen Wansai's eyes suddenly opened wide. Although he was old, he still had the power of a tiger, which scared Shen Hui so much that she took 2 steps back. Shen Hui calmed down and made up her mind. She pointed at Rong Jun, who was not far away, and said, "He and 4th Aunt drove Li Yundong away, not me." Chen Wankai was slightly stunned. Young Master Rong? Xiao Xian. They have no enmity with young Master Li, so why would they chase him away? Shen Hui sneered and said, "How would I know? Why don't you ask them?" While the father and daughter were talking, a voice suddenly came from the side. It was Chen Wansai's youngest son, Shen Yu. He said with an unhappy face, "Dad, I don't understand. Why do you think so highly of this Li Yundong? What's so great about him? Isn't he just a little gangster who climbed up by nepotism? Do you have to offend your relatives to please a stranger on Hui's birthday?" Chen Wankai was furious, but at this time, it was not convenient for him to lose his temper. He just glanced at Shen Yu coldly and scolded in a low voice, "What do you know?" After that, he walked up to Rong Jun and asked in a deep voice, "Young Master Rong, shall we said that you just persuaded young Master Li, who I invited, to leave?" Rong Jun saw Chen Wankai walking toward him. He was about to show off to his future father-in-law, but he didn't expect Chen Wankai to say such a thing. He was stunned and subconsciously looked at Shen Hui. Shen Hui immediately glared at him, her eyes full of threats, as if to say, "If you dare to give me up, you will die." Chen Wankai didn't need to look back. He seemed to have eyes on the back of his head. He sneered and said, "Don't worry about Shell. If she ordered you to do it, you don't have to cover up for her." Rong Jun complained in his heart, but he had no choice but to bite the bullet and say, "No, I wanted to ask him for a favor, but he played tricks on me. In the end, Auntie Shen couldn't stand it anymore and spoke up for me. Then he left in shame." Chen Wankai couldn't help laughing, as if he had heard the most absurd joke. "He left in shame? Ha 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 ha." Chen Wansai's laughter attracted everyone's attention for a moment. The hall suddenly quieted down, and only Chen Wansai's exaggerated laughter kept echoing. Rong Jun's heart was beating wildly. He was flustered by Chen Wansai's laughter, so he had to kick the ball to the 4th concubine, Li Shaoxian. "Uncle Shen, if you don't believe me, you can ask Auntie Shen." Chen Wankai stopped laughing. He turned his head to look at Li Shaoxian, his eyes full of impatience and suppressed anger. Li Shaoxian was able to gain a foothold in the Shen family not only because of her face. She saw that Shen Wankai was like a volcano that was about to erupt, and he could become furious at any time. Her heart trembled and she hurried forward, but she did not dare to play petty tricks with Shen Wankai at this time like Shen Hui. She immediately confessed, "Old Shen, I drove him away, but he was too rude. He didn't even respect me. Why did you invite such a person?" Chen Wankai suppressed his anger and said in a low voice, "Do you know why I invited him here?" Li Shaoxian said disapprovingly, "Isn't it because I want to find a tutor for Yuer and shall we?" "Oh, old Shen, there are so many good teachers in the world. Why do you have to find him?" Chen Wankai couldn't help but be so angry that his hands were trembling, but he still controlled his anger. "A tutor? You can think of that. Even if there is a top student who graduated from Harvard in the world, if I want to find him to be a tutor, I can also call for him. But do you know how much effort it took me to invite someone like Li Yundong to come here? I was afraid that my old face was not enough, so I specially found Dean Mengfan, who was on good terms with him, and then asked Dean Mengfan to find Zhou Qin. Only then did I ask him to come for the sake of Buddha." Chen Wankai trembled all over and said, "You, on the other hand, drove him away so easily with just a few words? Do you know how difficult it is to invite someone like him? Do you know how proud and arrogant people like them are?" Li Shaoxian felt that something was wrong in her heart, but in front of so many people, she refused to admit defeat. "Old Shen, today is Xiaoyi's birthday. What are you doing? If it doesn't work, just go and find him." Chen Wankai sneered and said, "Well, you drove him away. Go and invite him back. Remember, invite him." Li Shaoxian's smile froze. She said in a low voice, "Old Shen, today is Xiaoyi's birthday. There's no need to not give me face in front of so many people, right?" Chen Wankai also sneered rudely and said, "Have you ever given me face? When you drove him away, did you think about me? Li Xiaoxian's smile suddenly became extremely ugly. Xinyu couldn't help saying, Dad, are you kidding me? Are you making things difficult for my mother because of an outsider? Chen Wankai finally couldn't stand it anymore. His anger erupted like a volcano. He roared at Shen Yu. Do I still keep my word in this family? His roar scared everyone out of their wits. Li Xiaoxian immediately pulled Shen Yu aside and forced a smile at Chen Wankai. Old Shen, don't be angry. I'll invite him back now. As she spoke, she quickly ran out. At this time, the people in the hall began to whisper to each other. Most of these guests knew Chen Wankai very well. They knew that the old master of the Shen family doted on his fourth concubine the most. They had almost never seen him lose his temper in front of so many people. They couldn't help but speculate about who the guest that Chen Wankai had personally invited was. Li Xiaoxian went out of the door and felt very wronged. She had lived for so long, but she had never been run away like this in public. Her tears were about to fall, but as a member of a wealthy family, she had long been aware of this. This kind of emotion only lasted for a moment and immediately disappeared. She reorganized her emotions, quickly asked the servant where Li Jiandong and Su Chan were going, and then chased after them. At this time, Li Jiandong and Su Chan had not gone far. They had only walked about 200 meters when they heard an anxious shout from behind. Child Li, please wait, please wait. Li Jiandong turned his head with a smile and said to Su Chan, How is it? I told you that someone would come looking for you, right? Su Chan pouted and said unhappily, Do we still have to go back? Li Jiandong patted the little girl's head with a smile and said, I'll listen to you. If you say we'll go back, we'll go back. If not, we won't go back, okay? Su Chan nodded with a smile and said, Well, I'm going to scold her, and then we'll leave and piss her off. With that, the little girl turned her face and looked at Li Xiaoxian, who was running close to her, with evil intentions. Li Xiaoxian was not an ordinary person. At a glance, she could see that Su Chan was determined to make things difficult for her, while Li Jiandong, who was beside her, looked like he was watching the fun with folded arms. She immediately had an idea. Li Xiaoxian smiled apologetically at Su Chan and Li Jiandong and said, I'm sorry, I'm really sorry. It turns out that the flood rushed to the Dragon King Temple. I had eyes but failed to recognize Mount Tai. I didn't know that you two were distinguished guests invited by my old Shen. Su Chan snorted and said, Now you know? It's too late. What were you doing before? Li Xiaoxian forced a smile and said, As the saying goes, no quarrel, no friendship. Little sister, you are a big person and forgive me this time, okay? Su Chan made a face at Li Xiaoxian and said angrily, I won't forgive you. People like you are the most annoying. You bully others with your power and look down on others. Li Xiaoxian saw that Su Chan was determined not to go back. She was anxious. She felt wronged, but she was also afraid that she wouldn't be able to find Li Jiandong and go back to face Shen Wankai. She was ashamed and ashamed. For a moment, tears fell down. Su Chan was suddenly dumbfounded and couldn't help but look at Li Jiandong. She was kind-hearted and soft-hearted. When she saw this person crying, her heart softened and her anger dissipated a lot. The little girl looked at Li Jiandong eagerly and whispered, Yundong, what should we do? Li Jiandong smiled at Li Xiaoxian and said, Don't cry. If you have something to say, let's talk about it. Li Xiaoxian wiped away her tears and said, I know that what I said just now was a little too much, but please forgive me this time for the sake of old Shen, okay? Even if it's not for the sake of old Shen, for the sake of Yin Mengfan and Zhou Qin, even if it's not for the sake of monks, for the sake of Buddha, okay? Li Jiandong sighed softly and said, If I had known this would happen, why did I do it in the first place? To be honest, I didn't want to come to such a banquet, but Yin Mengfan was kind to me in the past, and I've never been able to repay her kindness. When I opened my tea house, she even gave me a big gift, which added a lot of color to the ceremony, so I couldn't repay her. Therefore, it's not so much for the sake of Shen Wankai or Zhou Qin, but for the sake of Mr. Yin. Otherwise, you wouldn't have been able to catch up with me at all. Seeing that there was a turning point in Li Jiandong's words, Li Xiaoxian immediately smiled through her tears and said quickly, Yes, yes, child Li, as long as you don't mind and don't get angry. I will apologize to you later and propose a toast to you. Li Jiandong smiled and waved his hand. Forget it. I don't drink. As he said this, he smiled at Xueqi and said, how about it? Are you going back? Although Xueqi knew that Li Jiandong had already made up his mind, she was also very happy that Li Jiandong had taken care of her opinion in front of outsiders. She felt sweet in her heart. She smiled sweetly and said, I'll go wherever you go. Why are you asking me? Li Jiandong nodded with a smile and said to Li Shaoxian, lead the way. Li Shaoxian nodded quickly and carefully led the way in front of him like a little wife. Shen Hui, who was in the villa hall, felt that time was passing like a year. She was afraid that Li Shaoxian would not be able to find Li Jiandong. At that time, the old man would be furious. That would be a terrible thing, and she would definitely not be able to escape. But what Shen Hui was more afraid of was that if Li Shaoxian really found Li Jiandong, wouldn't she have to be his disciple? Just as Shen Hui was pacing around anxiously like an ant, she suddenly heard the female companions who had gathered around her exclaim, oh, this handsome guy is back again. Shen Hui immediately looked up and saw that Li Shaoxian had led Li Jiandong and Xueqi back. She immediately complained, it's over. I can't run away this time. The girls beside her were puzzled and asked, Hui, is it so painful to have such a handsome guy as your master? Shen Hui gritted her teeth and said, you don't know that this person is a big sex fiend. The girls laughed and said, sex fiend? Well, I like this kind of guy. Shen Hui said with a crazy face, please stop making trouble. What's so good about having a teacher? There's no freedom at all. The girls looked at each other and nodded. That's true, but what on earth do you want to learn from him? This question also stunned Shen Hui. She couldn't help thinking, yes, the old man always wants me to be his disciple. What on earth should I learn from him? Thinking of this, Shen Hui suddenly had an idea. There was a sly look in her eyes, so she turned to the girls beside her and said with a smile, do you want to know what he can do? These girls had long wanted to go forward to talk to him. When they heard Shen Hui's words, they immediately nodded vigorously. Shen Hui chuckled and said, actually, he can do magic. You can ask him to do magic later. This guy can do magic. No matter how difficult the trick is, he can do it. The rarest thing is that he can do whatever you want him to do. When the girls heard this, their eyes immediately lit up. Is he so powerful? Isn't he more powerful than Lu Qian? Shen Hui raised her head and laughed. That's right. If you don't believe me, you can try it yourself later. After that, Shen Hui thought proudly, if this guy can do it, then I'll admit it. If he can't, I won't be able to worship him as my master. Ha ha ha, I'm really a genius. See. Chapter 534. After Li Yundong returned to the banquet, Chen Wankai immediately greeted him warmly. He said apologetically with a smile on his face, Child Li, I'm really sorry that you've suffered such grievances. Watch net. Li Yundong chuckled carelessly. Not at all. He turned his head to look at Xueqi and said with a smile, have I been wronged? Xueqi blinked and said cooperatively, I don't think so. Chen Wankai laughed and praised. Young Master Li is so young, but he has such breadth of mind. Not simple, not simple. Then, he turned his head and looked at Xueqi with a smile. And this is? Li Yundong smiled and said, this is my girlfriend. Nice to meet you, Mr. Shen, Xueqi said with a smile. Chen Wankai smiled and shook hands with her. He said in surprise, I thought that Zi Yuan Immortal was your girlfriend. It turns out that I was wrong. By the way, where's Zi Yuan Immortal? Li Yundong smiled and said, she has something to do, so she can't come. Chen Wankai sighed with regret. That's a pity. I wanted to ask her for advice on tea art today. Xueqi wanted to recommend herself, but when she remembered that she had caused such a big trouble in Desanxian last time, she felt uneasy. She was afraid that Li Yunyang would be unhappy, so she swallowed her words. When Li Yundong saw this, he smiled slightly, put his arm around the girl's shoulder, and said with a smile, Xueqi also knows how to make tea, and she's good at it. Mr. Shen, if you're interested, you can compare notes with her. Shen Wankai looked at Xueqi in surprise and nodded. Yes. Please come in. When the guests saw Chen Wankai warmly welcome Li Yundong in, they were all puzzled. Who on earth is this young man? How could Chen Wankai think so highly of him? Shen Yu stared at Su Chan greedily for a while, and then at Li Yunyang hatefully. He turned to Li Shaoxian beside him, gritted his teeth, and said, "Mom, did you really invite this guy back? Are you kidding me?" Li Shaoxian's face was gloomy. She looked at him with an unfriendly gaze and did not say anything. Shen Yu sneered again and said, "I really don't know what Dad is thinking. Is he confused? You only want me to acknowledge this person as my master. You must have eaten the wrong medicine. He really didn't know what was so great about this guy. Didn't he just know a few tricks? I am the successor of the Shen family. Why would I want to learn this?" Li Shaoxian's eyes flickered, and she scolded Shen Yu with an unkind expression. "If you had grown up a little, would the old man have been so concerned about you?" Shen Yu immediately cried out in grievance. "How am I not making progress? I just closed a deal for 5 million yuan, okay?" Li Shaoxian snorted. "So what if it's 5 million? How much of it is ours? Didn't they all end up in the old man's pocket?" Shen Yu didn't say anything. He looked at Li Yunyang more and more gloomy, as if he wanted to swallow him up in one bite. He gritted his teeth and said, "I really don't know what Dad is thinking. Before I met this guy, he had always been very good to me and didn't care about anything. Since I met this guy, he has been dissatisfied with me." Li Shaoxian sneered and said, "You'd better pay attention to yourself, otherwise." As she spoke, she turned to look at Shan Hui and said coldly, "If the old man is not satisfied with you, he changes his will and leaves all the property to his beloved daughter, then it will be too late for you to cry." Shen Yu suddenly jumped up and said, "That's impossible. I'm the only man in the family. Why should the family property be passed on to a woman?" Li Shaoxian sneered and said, "Judging from the old man's current state of madness, nothing is impossible." Shan Yu's face suddenly became very ugly, and even his eyes became sinister as he looked at Shan Hui. He whispered to Li Shaoxian, "Mom, what should we do?" Li Shaoxian said coldly, "The old man has a bad temper. You have to go along with him. You can't go against him. Just listen to him more. If he wants you to be his disciple, you have to be obedient." Shen Yu immediately said angrily, "No, absolutely not." Li Shaoxian also said angrily, "Why not?" Shen Yu snorted angrily and didn't say a word, but his eyes were still looking at Su Chan angrily and unwillingly. Li Shaoxian saw this and immediately said angrily, "For a woman? Or someone else's woman? Are you crazy? Are all the women in the world dead? Are you jealous of this?" Shan Yu's character and temper were very similar to Chen Wansai's when he was young, especially his stubborn temper. He straightened his neck and said, "I like this woman in the world." Li Shaoxian was furious. "Are you a bitch? The more you can't get it, the more you want it. Are all men so cheap?" Shen Yu took Li Shaoxian's arm and begged, "Mom, please help me. I really like her." Li Shaoxian suddenly broke free from his arm and said angrily, "T, how can I help her? To kill her boyfriend?" Shen Yu's face lit up with joy. "That's not bad. I know a few good men in the underworld. I promise I won't leave any clues." Li Shaoxian was furious. "If you kill him, are you sure that she will follow you? If the old man finds out, do you know what the consequences will be?" Shen Yu couldn't help glancing at Chen Wan Kai, who was chatting with everyone. Suddenly, like a deflated bull, he said resentfully, "Humph, when will it be my turn to be in charge of this family? Humph, if the old man goes crazy one day and really passes on the family property to Shen Hui, won't we be bullied for the rest of our lives?" This sentence immediately touched Li Shaoxian's heart. She looked at Chen Wan Kai with flickering eyes and thought, "I've worked hard for more than 10 years to endure humiliation in the Shen family. I thought I was about to make a name for myself, but I didn't expect that old Shen would not give me face today and teach me a lesson in front of so many outsiders. If it happened once, there will definitely be a second time. What should I do in the future? Yuer is right. The old man dotes on Xiaohui far more than you are. If he really passes on the family property to Shen Hui, where can I go to cry?" Li Shaoxian gritted her teeth and intertwined her fingers together. She gritted her teeth and said in a low voice, "No, I can't watch this happen." Just as Shen Yu and Li Shaoxian were plotting something, Shen Hui's female companions began to pester Li Yundong and ask him all kinds of questions. A tall and beautiful girl asked Li Yundong with a smile, "Hey, handsome, what's your name?" Li Yundong said politely and reservedly. Hello, my name is Li Yundong. Li Yundong? These girls secretly remembered the name, and they said with a smile, I heard that you can do magic? Really? Can you make one for us to see? Li Yundong didn't know whether to laugh or cry. I can't do magic, and I'm not a magician. Su Chan, who was standing to one side, was also very unhappy. In her opinion, as a dignified cultivator and the leader of a sect, Li Yundong was actually regarded as a magician. This was simply too insulting. But she couldn't refute it. She could only sulk alone and look at the girls around her with unkind eyes. These girls felt Su Chan's hostility, but they thought that it was Su Chan's instinct to repel the same sex, so they all became more and more enthusiastic. A girl simply leaned over to Li Yundong enthusiastically. She boldly reached out to pull his arm and said with a smile, Handsome, change it. We know you have changed it. The other girls also smiled and echoed, That's right, change it. At this time, Shen Hui also hid behind and fanned the flames. Yes, he has changed it. I've seen it. It's very exciting and beautiful. Li Yundong quietly leaned to the side and avoided the girls' hugs. He smiled and was about to speak when he saw Shen Wankai, who was next to him, suddenly walk over with a glass of wine in his hand. He laughed and said, It's so lively. What do you want to do? Li Yundong said with a smile, Nothing. Someone wants me to do magic. I said I'm not a magician. Shen Wankai laughed and said, Who wants you to do magic? As he said this, he looked at the girls around him. These girls had seen Shen Wankai fly into a rage just now, so they were a little afraid and nervous. They subconsciously retreated to the side, exposing Shen Hui. Shen Hui smiled dryly and hurriedly waved her hand and said, It's not me. Don't look at me. She secretly pinched the girl next to her and whispered, Hey, are you going to leave me in the lurch? The girl had to bite the bullet and said, Uncle Shin, we heard that this handsome guy can do magic, so we all want to see it. This should not be too much, right? Shen Wankai suddenly understood and said, So that's how it is. Yes, Child Li can indeed do magic. I still remember the last time I was in Desanxian. Li Yundong smiled bitterly in his heart and said, Mr. Shen, that was not a magic trick. Shen Wankai nodded and said, Yes, that was a magic trick of the immortal transformation. It was a magic trick. By the way, I've been wondering. Child Li, how did you do it? I can't figure it out. Can you tell me? Li Yundong smiled and said, I can't. Shen Wankai didn't take it seriously and laughed. I see. Just pretend that I didn't ask. As the two of them were talking, the people next to them also gathered around curiously. Someone asked Shen Wankai, Old Shen, what magic trick have you seen? Shen Wankai sighed and said, Last time, you didn't have the luck to see the real magic trick. I was lucky enough to see it. Haha. Shen Wankai laughed proudly. The people around him became more and more curious and asked, Mr. Shen, where did you see it? What kind of magic trick was it? Shen Wankai waved his hand mysteriously and said with a smile, I can't say. Seeing that Shen Wankai was unwilling to say, everyone looked at Li Yundong and said, Child Li, then tell us. Shen Hui also added fuel to the fire and said, Yes, change it. So many people are begging you. Isn't that enough? Li Yundong frowned secretly and said helplessly, Then what do you want to change? At this time, Rong Jun suddenly thought of something. He remembered that he had wanted to embarrass Li Yundong before, but he had been played by him. The most outrageous thing was that this person had shamelessly accepted all his money but didn't do anything. How could there be such a rascal in the world? When Rong Jun heard Li Yundong's words, he immediately stepped forward and said, Can you change into a dragon's liver and a phoenix's gallbladder? His words immediately made the people around him laugh. Child Rong is really humorous. How can this thing be changed? However, Li Yundong stared at Rong Jun and suddenly smiled and said, Yes. Well. I don't have a ticket. I'm very relieved, haha. Chapter 535. Li Yundong's words immediately aroused everyone's curiosity. Rong Jun laughed, his eyes full of mockery. How can there be dragon liver and phoenix gall in this world? Chen Wankai also asked curiously, Child Li, can you make dragon liver and phoenix gall? Li Yundong smiled and said, why not? After that, he turned over his palm, and everyone saw a small black pill the size of a thumb in his palm. Go to see. Li Yundong said, this is dragon liver and phoenix gall. Everyone laughed and said, are you kidding me? What kind of dragon liver and phoenix gall is this? Rong Jun also snorted and said, this is dragon liver and phoenix gall? Do you think we are all fools? However, Li Yundong said very seriously, has anyone seen a dragon? Everyone was stunned and looked at each other in dismay. Li Yundong asked again, has anyone seen a phoenix? Rong Jun said unhappily, have you seen one? Li Yundong raised the pill in his hand and said with a smile, yes, this is an elixir made of dragon liver and phoenix gall. It can prolong one's life after eating it. How could anyone believe it? They just shook their heads and laughed. Some of them were too embarrassed to say anything unpleasant because of Shen Wansai's face. Only Rong Jun sneered and said, this thing is so black. It can't be eaten to death, right? Su Chan, who was standing to one side, blinked at the pill and thought to herself, isn't this Sister Zi Yuan's 9 revolving dew pill? Hearing Rong Jun's words, Li Yundong was not angry. He just smiled and said to the crowd, whether it will kill people or not, won't we know if someone tries it? Everyone saw that the pill was black, but they didn't know its origin, let alone what it was made of. Although Child Li, who was highly valued by Chen Wan Kai, said that it was dragon liver and phoenix gall, who would believe it? Rong Jun snorted and thought, I also said that I grew up eating dragon liver and phoenix gall. Who are you fooling? Li Yundong saw that no one dared to test the medicine on their own. Even Chen Wan Kai just laughed at the side and didn't step forward. He chuckled and put away the pills again. The little girl looked at the people around her with disdain. She snorted secretly and muttered, dragon's liver and phoenix's gallbladder are not comparable to this 9-turn dew pill. Other than the 3 great supreme-grade immortal pills in the world, the 9 Revolutions Jade Dew pill was a first-grade immortal pill that couldn't be bought with money. These people didn't want this kind of top-notch immortal pill. They really had eyes but couldn't see gold and jade. Seeing that Li Yundong had put away the pills again, Rong Jun couldn't help asking, aren't you going to become a dragon's liver and a phoenix's gallbladder? Li Yundong said in surprise, I've already changed. That was a dragon's liver and phoenix's gallbladder. Rong Jun said with a mocking smile, do you think we are 3-year-old children? If this is an immortal spell, then I know it too. Li Yundong smiled and said meaningfully, it's because no one has seen the dragon liver and phoenix gallbladder that when I took out the real one, no one was willing to believe it. Can you blame me for that? Rong Jun sneered and was about to speak again when Chen Wan Kai couldn't help laughing. He tried to smooth things over and said, well, Child Li is just joking with everyone. Don't mind him. When everyone saw that Shen Wan Kai had opened his mouth, they all laughed along and dispersed one after another. Chen Wan Kai saw that Li Yundong was looking at the crowd with interest. There was no embarrassment or anger on his face. Instead, his eyes were full of meaningful sighs and sympathy for all living beings. It was as if the gods in heaven were looking down at the common people in the world, sighing at the ignorance of the world and sympathizing with their ignorance. This kind of gaze touched Chen Wan Kai. His heart skipped a beat and he asked subconsciously, Child Li, what you're talking about? Is it really a dragon liver and phoenix gallbladder? Li Yundong looked at Chen Wan Kai with a smile and said, Mr. Shen, if you don't believe me, why don't you try it? Chen Wan Kai hesitated for a moment, but as soon as he did, Li Yundong laughed and said, forget it, I'm really joking. Mr. Shen, don't mind me. Chen Wan Kai also chuckled and said, Child Li is really funny. But not long after he asked again, Child Li, I have something to ask, but I don't know if I can ask it. Li Yundong smiled and said, is there anything you can't ask? Chen Wan Kai thought for a moment and said very seriously, are there immortals in this world? Li Yundong was stunned. Mr. Shen, why do you suddenly ask this? Chen Wan Kai said with a sigh, last time, after attending the ceremony of Desanxian, I was lucky enough to see your amazing magic skills. Only then did I realize that the world is big and full of strange things. There are many capable people and crouching tigers and hidden dragons. After I came back, I had been thinking about what I saw that day. I also asked some magicians in private, and they all told me that these things could not be done by magic. Therefore, I thought that these were immortal magic and should not exist in this world. But I saw it again. It happened right in front of my eyes. Therefore, I even suspect that there are immortals in this world, and you and Zi Yuan immortal are both living immortals. Chen Wankai said solemnly to Li Yundong, Child Li, can you tell me if there are immortals in this world? Hearing this, Li Yundong sighed in his heart. Once upon a time, he was just like Chen Wankai. When he suddenly saw this power that was above the world, he would feel doubtful and confused about his previous knowledge. Li Yundong smiled and said, Gu Hong once said, there are all kinds of things in the world, and the people of the immortals are as rich as bamboo. The way of immortality is the way of nothingness. It means that there are all kinds of things in this world, let alone immortals. We can't use our limited knowledge to speculate about the infinite world. We think that things and people we haven't seen don't exist in this world. Chen Wankai sighed and nodded slightly. You're right. In the past, when I heard such words, I would have criticized them as fallacies. But since I saw Zi Yuan Immortal's ability at the tea competition and Child Li's ability at Desanxian, I realized that I was a frog at the bottom of a well. As he spoke, Chen Wankai said to Li Yundong solemnly then, Child Li, are you an immortal? Li Yundong couldn't help laughing. Me? Of course not. Although Chen Wankai had expected this answer, he still asked with some disappointment, Then, who is an immortal in this world? Child Li, who did you learn your skills from? Li Yundong smiled and pulled Suchan to him, saying, This is my first teacher. When Chen Wankai saw that Suchan, a delicate and beautiful girl, was actually Li Yundong's first teacher, he didn't believe it. However, when he saw that Li Yundong was speaking seriously, he was a little surprised and said, You really can't judge a book by its cover. Suchan was a little embarrassed. She said with a smile, No, I didn't teach him anything. As she spoke, she looked at Li Yundong with admiration and said, I only taught him a little cultivation kung fu before, but now he has become very, very strong, far more powerful than me. Chen Wankai sighed and said with a smile, That's also because a famous teacher produces a brilliant disciple. Suchan was not greedy for credit. She said with a smile, No, Sister Zi Yuan is a famous teacher. If there are immortals in this world, I think she is one. Chen Wankai clapped his hands and laughed. I agree. I absolutely agree. Miss Zi Yuan does have the beauty of an immortal. I haven't seen what Chang'e looks like, but she is definitely more beautiful than Chang'e. Li Yundong laughed and said, Mr. Shen, you flatter me. I thank you on behalf of Zi Yuan. But Mr. Shen, why did you suddenly ask about immortals? The smile on Chen Wansai's face gradually disappeared. He subconsciously touched his left chest and sighed deeply. He said, Child Li, you don't understand. Why do all the rich and powerful people in the world believe in ghosts and gods? I, Chen Wankai, used to start from scratch. I never believed in ghosts and gods. I thought it was superstition. But the richer I am, the older I am, the more I believe in it. Why is that? Chen Wankai said with emotion, Because we are afraid of death. Chen Wankai pointed to the magnificent hall of the villa and the scene of wealth and debauchery. He said, When I was young, I had nothing. Even if I died, it would not be a pity. But now, I have almost everything a man can have. However, time and illness can ruthlessly take away everything I have. I have no way to escape and resist. Even an emperor like Emperor Wan of the Han Dynasty, who was in a high position, would still sit in the front seat in the middle of the night, not asking about the common people, but asking about ghosts and gods, because he was also afraid of death. Li Yundong listened silently and did not say a word. Chen Wankai said again, I heard that Laozi lived for more than 100 years, Peng Zhu lived for 800 years, and Li Babai, the father-in-law of Qingqing, also lived for 800 years. Do you think this is true? Before Li Yundong could say anything, Suchan rushed to say, Of course it's true. These are all recorded in all kinds of historical materials. Why can't they be true? Chen Wankai smiled and said, In the past, I must have said that historical materials are not necessarily true. But now, even if it is false, I hope it is true. Child Li, I know that you must not be an ordinary person. If you know how to live forever, even if it is a way to prolong life, please tell me. I will definitely thank you. As he spoke, he turned around and waved to Shen Hui and Shen Yu, who had been listening to them not far away. He said, You too come here. Shan Yu and Shan Hui looked at each other and walked over reluctantly. Chen Wankai said solemnly to Li Yundong, "Child Li, I have a presumptuous request. I hope you can agree for my sake." Li Yundong smiled bitterly in his heart and thought to himself, "Here it comes again. Do you want to be my disciple again?" Chen Wankai said, "Young Master Li, regardless of whether you are an immortal or not, I admire your ability very much. I hope that you can accept them as your students. Even if you bring them with you every day to serve tea and water, it would be good." When Shen Yu heard this, he was immediately frightened. As the dignified heir of the Shen family, how could he serve tea and water to others? "Are you kidding me?" Shen Yu couldn't help but say angrily, "Dad, how many times do I have to say that I don't want to be his disciple?" Shan Hui immediately followed suit and said, "That's right, Dad. Can you respect us a little?" Chen Wankai glared at them unkindly and said, "I have the final say in this family." Li Yundong also sighed and said, "Mr. Shen, I understand what you mean, but it's not sweet to force it. If both of them don't want to, then it's useless for others to force them." Chen Wankai was anxious and was about to speak again, but Shen Yu rushed to say, "Did you hear that? He's right. It's not sweet to force it. Dad, don't be nosy." Chen Wankai was so angry that his face suddenly turned purple. He coughed violently and said angrily, "Are you two trying to piss me off?" At this time, Li Shaoxian saw Chen Wansai's appearance and immediately rushed over. She carefully stroked Chen Wansai's back and scolded Shen Yu, "Can't you go along with your father for once?" Shen Yu said angrily, "Has he ever gone along with me?" Chen Wankai was furious and roared, "You want me to go along with you? Well, let's talk about it when I'm dead." Shan Yu choked on his words until his face turned red. He immediately vented his anger on Li Yundong and said angrily, "It's all your fault. If you hadn't come, nothing would have happened. Why do you always have to go against me? Why do you have to make things difficult for me?" Shan Hui felt the same way and echoed, "That's right, that's right. It would have been better if you hadn't come." Seeing that the two of them were besieging Li Yundong, Suchan immediately stood in front of him and shouted angrily, "Don't talk about him like that. If you hadn't invited him, would Yundong have come? You people don't know what's good for you and keep targeting Yundong. You're really hateful." As she said this, she pulled Li Yundong's hand and said, "Yundong, let's go. Don't lower yourself to the same level as this kind of person." Li Yundong was not angry. He patted Suchan with a smile and said, "People laugh at me for being too crazy, and I laugh at them for not being able to see through me. Girl, let's go." After that, the two of them left hand in hand. Chen Wankai watched Li Yundong and Suchan leave. He suddenly felt a burst of anger rush to the top of his head. He coughed violently, and before he could catch his breath, his face suddenly turned purple. His vision darkened, and he fell backward. For a moment, there was a burst of exclamations in the hall. Shen Yu rushed to Chen Wankai and said in shock, "Oh no, Dad has a heart attack. Mom, go and get the medicine." Li Shaoxian ran upstairs in a panic. At this time, Chen Wansai's second and third wives heard the noise and also ran down in a panic. Li Shaoxian quickly rushed into Chen Wansai's bedroom and opened the medicine cabinet. However, just as she was about to take the medicine and rush down, she suddenly stopped. The anxious expression on her face disappeared bit by bit, replaced by a sinister and cold smile. Li Shaoxian unscrewed the cap of the bottle and walked to the bathroom next to the bedroom. She opened the toilet lid and poured all the medicine in the bottle into the toilet. Then, she stretched out her slender fingers and pressed the flush button. With a crashing sound, these life-saving pills immediately disappeared without a trace. As long as you type, you can see the published chapter content. Chapter 536. When Li Yundong and Suchan walked to the door of the hall, they heard the chaos behind them and screams coming one after another. "Go to the internet." Suchan couldn't help but stop and look back. She saw that everyone was surrounding Shan Wankai in a panic, stretching their heads out to look around. The little girl said curiously, "Yundong, it seems that someone is sick." "It's Mr. Shen." Li Yundong also looked back and shook his head secretly. "Mr. Shen is too overbearing and strong-willed. I saw that his face was yellow, his eyes were dark, and his hair was mostly white. At his age, There shouldn't be so much white hair. Obviously, there is something wrong with his liver and kidneys. I saw him drink so much just now, and he is not good at controlling his emotions and temper. His anger hurts his liver, and his qi and blood are greatly deficient. As a result, he has a relapse of heart disease. Xueqi hesitated for a moment and asked, Yundong, should we save him? Li Yundong sighed softly and said, the 9 revolving dew pill I took out just now is a panacea that can save his life. It's a pity that he didn't take it. Xueqi was slightly surprised. Then we won't save him? Li Yundong looked at the chaotic scene in the hall and sighed to Xueqi. This is his fate. We can't force it. Xueqi glanced at the people in the hall sympathetically. Through the gaps in the crowd, she saw Shen Wankai with his eyes closed. She sighed in her heart and said, just now, there was an elixir that was more efficacious than dragon liver and phoenix gall, but now, maybe Yundong is right. This is his fate, right? Just as they were about to walk out, they suddenly saw a fiery red Lamborghini driving over. Li Yundong was stunned when he saw the car. President Chao? Is she here too? But soon, the car stopped in front of him and Xueqi. It was Yin Mengfan who got out of the car in a hurry. She saw Li Yundong and Xueqi, who were about to leave, and said, Ah, Li Yundong, you're here? Am I late? Are you leaving? Li Yundong looked back, shook his head, and smiled sympathetically. It's not too late. We can still say goodbye to Mr. Shen. Yin Mengfan was confused. She looked into the hall and was shocked. What's going on? Li Yundong smiled but didn't answer. Instead, he pointed to the fiery red Lamborghini and said, Why did you drive President Chao's car here? Where is President Chao? Yin Mengfan said anxiously and quickly, My car has been sent for repair. Let me borrow her car. Hey, what's going on? Xueqi explained, President Shen is having a heart attack. You should go and take a look. Maybe. This is the last time you'll see him. Yin Mengfan was shocked. She didn't even have the mood to blame Xueqi for speaking too straightforwardly. What? How did this happen? Li Yundong smiled and said, Mr. Yin, please go and have a look. Xueqi and I will leave first. Yin Mengfan had seen Li Yundong's extraordinary means several times. She knew that Li Yundong was definitely not an ordinary person. She had also seen him save Xueqi, who had a heart attack. Seeing that Li Yundong was about to leave at this time, she immediately said anxiously, Li Yundong, you can't leave. Hurry up and save her. Li Yundong shook his head and said with a meaningful smile, Someone doesn't welcome me. I can't save her. Yin Mengfan stamped her feet and said, How can you say such a thing at a time like this? At this time, Xueqi couldn't help but quickly explain what had just happened to Yin Mengfan. Only then did Yin Mengfan understand, but she still said unwillingly, Li Yundong, I know that you are a strange man with a broad mind. You won't argue with children, right? Li Yundong smiled slightly. They are not children. They are about the same age as me. Yin Mengfan said anxiously, But you can't just watch them die. Do you know why we went to find you when you and Xueqi were in the small hotel last time? It was because I saw that you had cured Xueqi, and I knew that my uncle's heart was not good, so I wanted to ask you to take a look at him. But later, I forgot to tell you for some reason. Even if you don't care about me, for Buddha's sake, can you help me? Li Yundong's heart skipped a beat. Only now did he know why Xueqi and the others had appeared in the small hotel when he and Xueqi had reached the Xueqi phase for the first time. Xueqi also looked enlightened. She pulled Li Yundong's arm and whispered, Yundong, in that case, we owe Mr. Yin a big favor. If it weren't for her, I'm afraid that the two of us would have. Li Yundong smiled and patted the little girl's hand, indicating that he understood. He turned his head and nodded to Yin Mengfan. Mr. Yin, let's go in and have a look. Yin Mengfan was overjoyed. She quickly pulled Li Yundong and rushed inside. After the three of them entered the hall, they found that everyone was tightly surrounding Shan Wankai. No one had noticed that Li Yundong had returned. At this time, a middle-aged but still charming woman was kneeling on the ground, resting Shen Wankai on her knees. She raised her head and said loudly to Shen Yu, Shaoxian, haven't you got the medicine yet? Shen Yu seemed to be very afraid of this woman. He said in a low voice, maybe there's too much medicine and she's looking for it? The woman sneered and said, Is it that hard to find? I think she's hoping that the old man will die early so that she can run amok, right? Shen Yu's face turned red. He looked at the guests around him, suppressed his anger, and said, Auntie Zhang, how can you say that? The third wife, named Auntie Zhang, said sarcastically, isn't it? In this family, aren't you and she the ones who want the old man to die the most? Shen Yu was like a mouse whose tail had been stepped on. He screamed, Bullshit, we didn't. Li Yundong saw that Shen Wancai's life and death were unknown, but his own family members were fighting in front of outsiders. He frowned secretly and asked Yin Mengfan, who is this? Yin Mengfan said in a low voice, this is Shen Hui's mother, and also Shen Wancai's third wife. As she spoke, she saw a woman about 50 years old next to her. She couldn't help but whisper, there are so many outsiders here. Don't talk too much. Li Yundong asked again, who is this? Yin Mengfan explained in a low voice, this is my uncle's second wife. Her surname is Ma. My uncle's first wife suffered a stroke more than 30 years ago and was paralyzed in bed. She was like a living dead, unconscious and unable to think. However, my uncle thought of the benefits of starting a family from scratch with her, so he never divorced her. But he had no children, so he found this second wife. The second wife gave birth to 3 children for my uncle, 1 boy and 2 girls. Unfortunately, 2 of them died, and the remaining girl has gone abroad and rarely contacted the Shen family. In order to carry on the family line, Shen Wancai married the third concubine, who is the one talking. When she was young, she was very beautiful and Shen Wancai liked her very much. Unfortunately, her belly was not good enough and she couldn't have children. In desperation, Shen Wancai had to find another one, which was Li Shaoxian. Li Shaoxian worked very hard. As soon as she arrived, she gave birth to a boy for Shen Wancai, who was Shen Yu. But after 2 years, the third concubine also gave birth to a child, Shen Hui. Because Shen Hui was clever and cute since she was a child, she was the most favored by my uncle. Li Yundong sighed slightly when he heard this. The relationship between these big families is really complicated. The 2 of them were talking in low voices, and the scene was still arguing loudly. Aunt Zheng sneered and said, can you stop talking? If it weren't for this unfilial son, would the old man be so angry? Shen Yu couldn't help but say angrily, is it all my fault? Didn't Shen Hui say anything to anger Dad? At this time, Shen Hui was already extremely regretful, and her eyes were filled with tears of horror and fear. When she heard Shen Yu's words, she couldn't help crying and shouting, I know I was wrong. Stop arguing. Shen Yu was immediately very proud. Did you hear that? She admitted that she was wrong. What does this have to do with me? Aunt Zhang said angrily, Bullshit, you were the one who started it. Do you think I didn't hear you? The second wife advised with a sad face. Oh, stop arguing, stop arguing. She turned her head to look at housekeeper Zhang and sighed. Go and see Shaoxian. Did she get the medicine? Why hasn't she come for so long? Housekeeper Zhang answered and was about to go upstairs when he saw Li Shaoxian shouting before she arrived. She's coming, she's coming. When everyone heard this, their gazes immediately turned to look at the second floor. They saw Li Shaoxian rushing to the railing of the stairs with a pale face and saying in horror, the medicine has been taken. I can't find it. The crowd suddenly burst into an uproar. The second wife was the softest, and she couldn't bear such a blow. Her eyes darkened and she fell back. Housekeeper Zhang was quick and immediately held her up. Aunt Zhang was stunned for a moment. She immediately frowned and shouted angrily, Li Shaoxian, what kind of bullshit tea are you talking about? I saw half a bottle of medicine yesterday. How could it be gone today? Li Shaoxian also said angrily, Zhang, keep your mouth clean. If you don't believe me, go and see for yourself. Since when did the Shen family allow you to teach me a lesson? Aunt Zhang was furious and threw Shen Wancai to the ground. She stood up and said angrily to the crowd, it just so happens that there are so many people here today. Everyone, watch carefully. This woman has always been eyeing our Shen family's property. She hopes that the old man will die early so that she can take all the property for herself. Today, she actually took this opportunity to kill the old man. Everyone, please take a good look at this beast with a human's face clearly. I swear to God that I definitely saw that there was still half a bottle of medicine in the old man's medicine bottle yesterday. If I lie, let me be a whore in my next life. The crowd burst into an uproar. A woman cursed herself to be a whore in her next life. How vicious was this oath? They immediately looked at Li Xiaoxian in confusion. Li Xiaoxian's thoughts were exposed by Aunt Zheng. Her face turned red, and she gritted her teeth and said, "You're slandering me. When did this family belong to you? I, Li Xiaoxian, also swear in public today that if I lie, I will be struck by lightning." When Xueqi saw this scene, she subconsciously remembered the internal strife that had happened when she had just returned to the Fox Zen school. The little girl had already had something on her mind. At this time, she became more and more nervous. She grabbed Li Yunyang's hand and was lost in thought. Li Yunyang noticed the little girl's abnormality, but he didn't think too much about it. He just turned to Yin Mengfan and said, "If they continue to quarrel like this, I'm afraid that Mr. Shen will really die." Yin Mengfan originally felt that she was not a direct relative and could be regarded as an outsider. Logically speaking, she should not have been able to intervene. However, at this time, Shen Wancai's life and death were unknown. The third concubine and the fourth concubine, who were usually at odds with each other, actually ignored Shen Wancai and swore at each other in public. This was simply improper. Yin Mengfan couldn't help it. She stepped forward and hugged Shen Wancai, shouting angrily, "Stop arguing. Do you all want uncle to die?" When everyone saw Yin Mengfan, they were stunned for a moment. Only then did the third madam's face soften a little. "It's Xiao Yin. You came at the right time. You were also here yesterday. Is there still medicine in the old master's medicine bottle? Tell me quickly." Li Xiaoxian's heart tightened and she immediately scolded. How would she know? She's an outsider. What right does she have to talk nonsense here? Yin Mengfan couldn't help but say angrily, "Shut up, all of you. Do you really want uncle to die?" Li Xiaoxian couldn't wait for Shen Wancai to die immediately. In this way, the property of the Shen family would undoubtedly fall on Shen Yu's head. At that time, her mother would be noble because of her son. Wouldn't she get whatever she wanted? However, the third concubine didn't want Shen Wancai to die. If the old master really died, it was not certain how much of the Shen family's property she could get. Moreover, she had always thought that the old master doted on Shen Hui and might give her the family property. Therefore, she had always had an unspeakable thought in her heart. Now that the big plan had not been completed, how could Shen Wancai die? Only then did the third concubine's heart tighten. She immediately rushed to Shen Wancai nervously. While patting his chest, she shouted to Steward Zhang, "Mr. Zhang, call the old master's personal doctor. Hurry up. If it's any later." Before she could finish her words, her mouth suddenly opened wide, and the rest of her words were stuck in her throat. The third concubine was stunned. Her hand, which was pressing on Shen Wancai's chest, trembled and moved to the pulse of his neck. Suddenly, her whole body trembled, and her face was full of horror and despair. She said in a trembling voice, Old master, he is dead." Everyone was shocked. At this time, the second concubine had just woken up. When she happened to hear this, she immediately fainted without saying a word. For a moment, the hall was in chaos. Only Yin Mengfan was calm. She said loudly, don't quarrel. The old master can still be saved." As she said this, she shouted to Li Yundong, "Li Yundong, what are you doing? Hurry up and save him." This sentence made everyone look at Li Yundong in unison. Chapter 537. When Li Xiaoxian and Shen Yu saw Li Yundong returning, they were shocked. Shen Yu couldn't help but say angrily, "What are you doing here again? It's all because of you that my father became like this." Li Xiaoxian's heart skipped a beat, and she also scolded loudly, "Yes, you are a jinx. It's all because of your appearance that old Shen is like this." Although the third concubine couldn't get along with Li Xiaoxian in every way, she also felt that this matter was caused by Shen Wancai's insistence that Shen Yu and Shen Hui become Li Yundong's apprentices. If it hadn't been for Li Yundong, Shen Wancai would never have been lying here like this. Therefore she also said loudly, "Go away, no one will let you come back." As she spoke, she turned her head and shouted at the frightened housekeeper, "What are you still doing? Make a phone call. As she spoke, she thought that if Shen Wankai really died, she would really have no status or weight in this family. In the future, she would definitely be bullied by Li Xiaoxian. At that time, her life would be miserable, and it would be unimaginable. Go to the internet. Thinking of this, the third concubine burst into tears. Tears flowed down her face. She hugged Shen Wankai and burst into tears. Seeing that the third concubine was crying without any regard for the severity of the situation, Yin Mengfan couldn't help but say angrily, "Don't cry. I invited Li Yundong to treat my uncle. He is a master. When Chao Kefi had a heart attack, he saved her on the spot. If it weren't for him, Chao Kefi would have died long ago." The crowd suddenly stirred, and they all looked at Li Yundong in surprise and complexity. They saw that although Li Yundong was dignified and calm, he was really too young. How could he look like an experienced doctor? Rong Jun looked at Li Yundong in surprise and couldn't help asking, "Are you a doctor?" Li Yundong smiled slightly. "No." Rong Jun was even more surprised. "Then what qualifications do you have to practice medicine?" Yin Mengfan couldn't help glaring at him and said angrily, "Don't you believe me? When Chao Kefi had a heart attack, all of us were helpless. Coincidentally, Chao Kefi ran out of medicine. At that time, I thought she was going to die. In the end, Li Yundong saved her with just a massage of his hands. I saw it with my own eyes, and Chao Kefi's employees saw it with their own eyes. Do you need me to find someone to testify?" Yin Mengfan was originally a strong woman with a strong personality. She had been in the workplace for a long time and was also in a high position. When she got angry, everyone present was shocked. They couldn't help but think, Yin Mengfan admires this young man so much, and Chen Wankai has also been so enthusiastic about this young man before. One of them may have misjudged him, but both of them think so highly of him. Maybe he really is a hidden genius? Li Xiaoxian's heart trembled. She knew that Yin Mengfan was a person of her word. If what Yin Mengfan said was true, that this young man really had the ability to save Shen Wankai, then she would be in trouble. Li Xiaoxian immediately approached Shen Yu quietly, hooked his arm with her fingers, and said to him in a low voice, "Say something, do something. Do you want to see him come back to life and make things difficult for us?" Shen Yu seemed to wake up from a dream. He immediately jumped up and said loudly, "No, what if Dad, who could have been saved, was really killed by this person? Moreover, this person doesn't have a medical license, and he's not a doctor. Last time, it was a coincidence. Do you want him to try again this time? My father is not this barefoot doctor's test subject." Li Xiaoxian also pretended to be sad. She squatted down, took Shen Wansai's hand, and cried, "Old Shen, it's all my fault. I didn't discipline my son well and made you so angry. Don't worry, I will find the best doctor to treat you. You will definitely get better." Although Li Xiaoxian did not object explicitly, she did not say a word to show that Shen Wankai could still be saved. She could not let this young man act recklessly. What she wanted was to delay the time. The longer it took, the more powerless Shen Wankai would be. Others didn't know whether Shen Wankai was really dead or not, but Li Yundong and Su Chan were very clear about it. They were even more clear about Li Xiaoxian's tricks. Su Chan couldn't help whispering to Li Yundong, "Yundong, this woman is so vicious." Li Yundong shook his head and motioned for her not to speak. However, although the two of them kept a low profile, others were not willing to let them go. Xin Yu once again took the initiative to burn the fire of war on Li Yundong, trying to transfer the conflict. Shen Yu shouted, "Get out of here, you two. I don't want to see you. Every time I see you, nothing good happens." At this time, Rong Jun also took the opportunity to make trouble. He wanted to take revenge for being teased by Li Yundong before. He said in a dignified manner, "That's right. It was fine at first, but when you came, something happened." Then he said to Li Xiaoxian, "Aunt Shen, don't worry. I know a very good doctor. I'll call him right now." Rong Jun took out his mobile phone, only to see Su Chan glaring at him angrily. He became more and more unhappy and vented his anger on Li Yundong. He shouted, "What are you still doing? Why don't you leave? Don't you see that they don't want you to stay here?" Su Chan had experienced the murder of Mount Qingqing before, and she had been suppressing a question in her heart. Why do people in the world want to make things difficult for them? especially for Li Yundong. So much so that someone wanted to frame him for a major murder case? Why is that? Su Chan saw that everyone was taking turns to blame Li Yundong. Although Li Yundong had been smiling in a good temper, she finally couldn't help it. Su Chan couldn't help but suddenly scream angrily. Why do you always have to make things difficult for Yundong? Why? Her shout suddenly scared everyone, and even Li Yundong was stunned and looked at her strangely. The girl was so excited that her whole body was trembling. She stepped forward and scolded loudly. You have eyes but can't see. You idiots who confuse black and white and look down on others. Our Yundong is a first-class genius and a first-class good man in the world. He has never offended anyone, nor has he ever embarrassed anyone. But why are there always those people in the world who want to make things difficult for him? Why? As she said this, she pointed angrily at Shen Wankai, who was lying on the ground, and said, a person like him, not to mention not dead, even if he is dead, my Yundong can save him. You don't want such a miraculous doctor who can bring a dead person back to life. But you give up what is close at hand for what is far away. Humph! You deserve to die. The power of a beautiful woman's anger was like a bomb. When a beautiful woman like Su Chan got angry, it was like a nuclear bomb had been dropped in the field, so no one dared to speak. There was a dead silence in the field. The more Su Chan spoke, the more excited she became. She turned her head and angrily pulled Li Yundong's hand. With tears in her eyes she said, Yundong, let's go. Ignore these blind guys. As she said this, she took Li Yundong's hand and walked out. At this time, everyone came to their senses. Li Shaoxian was so angry that her whole body was trembling. She couldn't help saying angrily, who does she think she is? How dare she teach us such a lesson? Yin Mengfan knew that Li Yundong was obedient to Su Chan. At this time, Su Chan was pulling him away, so Li Yundong would definitely leave without saying anything. She didn't care about their friendship. She was shocked and couldn't help grabbing the third concubine and shouting, Aunt Zheng, do you want to see Uncle die? Go and beg Li Yundong. Only he can save my uncle. At this time, the third concubine calmed down a little. She still said with some doubt, can he really save him? But he's not a doctor. Yin Mengfan stamped her feet and said, what time is it? You still care about this? When the doctor comes, he will be dead. Isn't this the time for desperate measures? This sentence suddenly woke up the dreamer. The third concubine was not easy to deal with. She immediately came to her senses and subconsciously stood up. She wanted to catch up, but when she moved, she felt that it was not enough for her to go alone. She immediately pulled Shen Hui out of the crowd and said as she chased after her, hurry up, go and beg him. If the old man really dies, how will we live in the future? Shen Hui was just a spoiled young lady. Suddenly encountering such a big change, how could she react? At this time, she was dragged out by her mother in a daze, but her mind was in a mess. The third concubine soon caught up with Li Yundong and begged loudly, young Master Li, please wait, please wait. At this time, Li Yundong did not turn around. Instead, Su Chan turned around and scolded angrily with a cold face. What else do you want? Can't we go? Seeing this, the third concubine's heart suddenly turned cold. She had already regarded Li Yundong as her life-saving straw. If this last life-saving straw left her, she really didn't know what to do. The third concubine panicked. Her trembling legs couldn't help but go soft. She knelt on the ground with a thud and cried like rain. Young Master Li, you are a magnanimous person. Don't argue with them. They must have wanted to kill the old man, so they did everything possible to stop you. Don't be fooled. I believe in your medical skills very much. Really, if you don't believe me, you can ask Xiaoweeds. The third concubine was in a hurry. She pulled Shen Hui hard and said loudly, Xiaowi, is that right? Tell me, say something. Only then did Shen Hui come to her senses. She looked at Li Yundong with tears in her eyes, only to see the young and handsome boy turn around and look at her with a smile. He looked confident, as if he could turn the tide even if the sky collapsed. The reason why Shen Hui had always been unable to get along with Li Yundong was that the first impression was too bad. Secondly, Yin Mengfan admired Li Yundong very much, and her father even wanted her to worship him as a teacher, which aroused the little girl's rebellious mentality. However, in front of such a sudden change, Xueqi seemed to have become a lot more mature. She had seen Li Yundong's magic more than once before. In the past, she subconsciously did not want to believe in this boy's extraordinary ability, but now, her heart was like a clear mirror, bright and clear. At this time, the only person in the world who could save her father was the boy in front of her. Xueqi did not hesitate any longer. She knelt on the ground with a thud and cried, "Li Yundong, I know you are a strange person. Please forgive my previous offense and ignorance. Please save my father." As she said this, she lay on the ground and cried bitterly. Li Yundong was a person who had tender feelings for women. Seeing that Xueqi had knelt down and admitted her mistake, he sighed softly in his heart. He gently raised his hand, and a powerful zhenqi lifted Xueqi and the third concubine up. He sighed and said, "Forget it. Those who don't know are not guilty." Xueqi and the third concubine saw that Li Yundong was 1 or 2 meters away from them. He raised his hand and lifted them out of thin air. It was as magical as a magic scene in a movie or TV show. They were immediately surprised and delighted. The third concubine had been a little skeptical before, but now she completely believed Yinmeng Fan's words. There must be something extraordinary about this boy, she said with ecstasy. "Child Li, are you willing to save our old master? That's great. You are really kind-hearted. May Guanyin Bodhisattva bless us." Li Yundong said with a smile, "It's not effective to think of Buddha at this time." As he said this, he turned his head, stroked the little girl's hair with a smile, and said softly, "Chan'er, can I go and save Mr. Shen?" Su Chan's heart softened when she heard their cries, but she still raised her head and said with tears in her eyes, "Yundong, I have no problem with you saving people. But do you know that in my heart, you are a first-class hero and a first-class master in the world? How can you be bullied like this without saying a word? You have to promise me that you can't let others look down on you, okay? I'm very sad to see others look down on you." After Li Yundong came out of the spirit space, he was no longer the angry and irritable boy he used to be. Therefore, in the face of everyone's difficulties, he did not lose his temper. However, when he saw the tears in the little girl's eyes, he couldn't help but stretch out his hand to wipe away the tears from the corners of her eyes. Li Yundong said seriously and solemnly, "Okay, I promise you. For you, from now on, I will never let anyone look down on me. Today, I'm going to let them see what a divine technique that can regenerate flesh and bones is." Vote recommendation, previous page, return to table of contents, next page, error report if you like. Please click here to add A Vixen at Home to the bookshelf, so that you can read the latest chapters and updates of A Vixen at Home in the future. If you have any suggestions or comments on A Vixen at Home, please click here to express your views. You're tuning in to the Xueqi's Martial Arts Saga YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.